It all begins when mysterious portals suddenly appear in the sky above the city. There is no time to understand the phenomenon as monstrous creatures begin to emerge from these openings. A man nearby panics upon witnessing a strange creature attacking a child. Instinctively, he runs to protect the boy, embracing him amidst the danger. But instead of being struck, a blue light unexpectedly envelops them both. This is how certain humans awaken special abilities, giving rise to what became known as the Hunters. Thanks to the efforts of these warriors, the world finally experienced a brief period of peace. However, just as everyone believed that peace would last, a new tragedy struck humanity. This new threat was considered the greatest of all, called the Chaos Portal. Even with the union of countless powerful hunters, sealing this threat proved impossible. Faced with such a colossal crisis, humanity stood on the brink of extinction. That's when 12 extraordinary figures decided to face the source of the calamity. They were the most powerful hunters on the planet, wielding top-tier abilities. They confronted absolute chaos and were hailed as the saviors of all humankind. Thus, they gained fame as a legendary group that protected the world from destruction. And they received the title of the 12 Apostles after successfully completing their mission within the portal. One of the members checks the time and realizes that nearly 8 hours have passed since the battle began. With the mission complete, the destructive creature was finally eradicated from that place. One of the huntresses collapses to the ground in exhaustion, while another praises everyone for their excellent performance. She mentions that the portal will only reappear in 100 years, and that perhaps this was the group's final meeting. The white-haired girl then asks what her companions plan to do from now on. Some already had clear plans, such as taking a vacation or focusing on personal and business projects. Soon, one of the hunters turns and asks about the plans of our main character. This is the Thunder Emperor, a young man who has yet to find a clear purpose in life. An old mage approaches and comments that, judging by the young man's expression, he is still uncertain about his future. The elder then sits beside him, showing understanding toward the boy's inner conflicts. He explains that the power they bear is far too heavy to be carried alone, and that any carelessness in using it could bring catastrophic consequences. That's why, if the young man still feels lost, the elder would like to make him a proposal. At that moment, the mage invites him to embark on a journey together to discover the true path of a hunter. However, the protagonist declares that he is going to leave that life behind once and for all. The mage is taken aback and left speechless, as he had expected a completely different answer. With this revelation, all the members of the group are visibly stunned. He looks around confused and asks why they're all so shocked and if the blonde guy really said that. One of his comrades then confronts him, wanting to know what he intends to do if he gives up being a hunter. Without hesitation, the young man firmly replies that he now dreams of becoming a writer. At this point, his friends are even more intrigued and ask him to repeat what he just said. Then the young man reveals with a smile that he plans to write web novels, stories published online. The scene shifts and we see a man on stage giving a speech about his book. He advises the audience to imagine that they are telling the story directly to someone in front of them. And he emphasizes that the most important thing is to keep that person constantly interested. Meanwhile, the lecture is being streamed on a laptop screen, highlighting that the essential rule is to be entertaining. Months after the sealing of the portal, the Thunder Emperor appears as a fledgling writer. He finishes the online lecture, fascinated by the content he just watched. Full of ideas, he begins to wonder if he was truly born to be a writer. Excited, he gets ready to write, but his friends interrupt the moment. They ask where he thinks he's going and invite him to grab a drink after class. Faced with the situation, he explains that the deadline is tomorrow, so his friends decide to go ahead without him. Before leaving, they all say goodbye, wishing him good luck, and the aspiring author feels motivated. Suddenly, he notices something on the ground and wonders if that's what the lecturer was talking about. A strange creature appears, and the young man feels an energy akin to that of a masterpiece before him. At that moment, the waitress approaches with the drink he had ordered. He simply asks her to leave it on the table, too focused to stop now. With renewed energy, the writer prepares to continue his story. Then he takes advantage of the moment and puts on his headphones, ready to work hard until a final deadline. As the young man types, a colossal monster spreads chaos outside the cafe. The creature attacks people, but he tries to stay focused on his creative ideas. The monster then captures a victim, and the writer envisions the perfect scene for his plot. Excited, he becomes even more motivated, realizing he's close to finishing his grand creation. Only one final line remained as the creature continued its assault outside. He concentrates deeply, determined to end the narrative with a powerful conclusion. At that moment, the monster's tail rises, ready to strike the cafe with full force. The young man celebrates having finished his work just in time. But right after, the creature's attack suddenly shatters the window. Shocked by the unexpected blow, he watches his belongings fly through the air. Stunned, he stares at his laptop, now with a completely ruined screen. He remains on the ground, facing the damage caused by the monster. Desperate, he puts his hands over his face, deeply mourning the loss of his work. Filled with rage, he realizes the entire manuscript is destroyed and his eyes begin to glow. At that moment, a wave of golden energy bursts out of him with great intensity. The surge strikes the creature's tentacle directly, burning it like paper. The monstrosity stumbles backward, reacting to the pain of the impact. Surrounded by golden lightning, the former hunter rises and calls the enemy an octopus. He stomps firmly on the ground and challenges the grotesque creature to rise and fight. With his body covered in electricity, he stares at the monster and declares that its time to win has not yet come. It's then that we see a woman suddenly start screaming in panic. A man named Jason is electrocuted underwater, and the young woman screams his name. She goes into shock upon seeing the protagonist of the drama die so tragically. This is Tae Yuseo, an S-rank hunter who loves binge-watching dramas with snacks. Soon after, a boy appears, observing the mess she's making. This is Tae Yujin, her younger brother, still in high school. Among hunters, she is known as the Red Flame, a powerful figure of S-rank. Besides her strength, she also stands out for her refined beauty and stylish fashion sense. Because of this, she became a true celebrity among hunters. Even so, her younger brother refers to her as Thing and wonders how anyone could believe she's the famous Red Flame. She complains about being interrupted, but he fires back, calling her an unemployed woman with no vacation. He insists that his sister helped with the house chores, but she's only interested in the TV remote. Suddenly, both go silent upon hearing the ringtone of his cell phone. An urgent alert appears on the phone about the opening of a new portal in Seoul. The boy reads the message and discovers the area has been classified as a red zone. In response, his sister grabs her backpack and says she's heading to the portal site. He asks if she was summoned, but the girl replies, "Not exactly." The hunter simply believes it's better to check in person what's going on. Shortly after, her brother smiles and says she looks amazing when she's serious, but he adds that she doesn't need to worry. Someone's already taking care of the situation. He's referring to our protagonist, the unemployed and unlucky one in the group. At that moment, the writer appears sitting on the ground, looking like he's lost everything. He stares at his destroyed gear and realizes the hard drive is completely ruined. With the monster's body lying in the background, the young man laments how miserable his life is. A little angel appears to remind him to save his files, and he regrets how his debut turned out. He dreamed of finding success with his first work and having a triumphant beginning. After that, he imagined becoming a renowned author, winning awards for Best Web Novel of the Year. He even pictured himself giving lectures and starting his era of glory. But he quickly realizes it was all just a fantasy. Consumed by rage, the protagonist yells that he's going to turn the octopus into grilled skewers. He swears he's going to make it pay and that the monster picked the wrong person to mess with. Then he channels his dark aura and heads off in search of the dungeon boss. Without hesitation, he launches forward like lightning toward the enemy. Meanwhile, a group of hunters descends from a helicopter and announces the end of the mission. They've already evacuated the civilians and are now preparing to deal with the remaining monsters. One of the members asks if the task is almost complete, and a colleague responds affirmatively. The next one comments that the mission was way too easy for an unexpected portal. That was only possible thanks to Captain Masaki, an A-rank hunter known as the Tractor. However, the captain orders them to stop chatting and focus on the mission. He warns that the portal boss is likely to appear soon, and they need to be ready. One of the soldiers says that an A-rank boss doesn't pose a challenge to their commander. Suddenly, dragon-shaped silhouettes are seen reflected in the windows of a building. The man smiles at the sight and comments that the enemy could strike at any moment. Right after, a gigantic multi-headed creature emerges, and the captain orders everyone to get ready. Then a massive scale-covered tail bursts through the center of the city. With a devastating blow, it hits the ground and sends the hunters flying. One of the fighters screams in panic, claiming that a hydra shouldn't be in an A-rank portal. Immediately after, the tip of the tail begins to drip red liquid onto the ground. The captain is shocked by the scene and spots a blood-covered hand among the rubble. An alert appears revealing that the creature is a triple A-rank hydra. The leader immediately commands them to fire at full strength against the monster. Even so, the creature ignores the shots and strikes back with a tail attack that takes down one of the hunters. The impact is so powerful, it raises a massive cloud of dust around them. At that moment, the captain realizes the portal's rank has increased and decides to call for stronger reinforcements. Meanwhile, a hunter panics upon seeing his fallen and severely injured friend. Faced with that scene, the leader understands he won't be able to defeat the monster alone. But unexpectedly, one of the Hydra's heads fires a beam of purple energy. One of the hunters quickly shields his wounded companion from the incoming explosion. Soon after, the subordinate looks over at the captain, who begins charging up his golden aura. With that, the commander understands he must act immediately without wasting a single second. His task is to buy time, but with 9 heads, the challenge seems insurmountable. Even coughing up blood, the captain shows he won't give up so easily. He grips his hammer tightly and shouts that he won't surrender without a fight. He chooses to keep fighting because he knows there are still lives depending on him. Then the A-rank hunter leaps toward the Hydra without hesitation. With a furious roar, he shows all his courage and vows to fight to the end. Next, he uses his most powerful strike and lands a crushing blow on the creature. However, he's shocked to see that only 2 of the heads were hit. One of the other heads quickly retaliates with a violent burst of energy. He freezes in fear as the force of the attack rapidly closes in. At that moment, he's struck directly, and his hammer is blown far away by the explosion. Fallen and wounded, he realizes he can't allow himself to lose consciousness. Meanwhile, the Hydra begins forming a sphere of energy, threatening to destroy the entire area. Overcome with despair, the captain feels powerless in the face of such overwhelming force. But suddenly, an unknown golden lightning bolt hits the creature's sphere. Stunned, he watches without understanding what just happened. Reflected in his eyes appears the image of someone surrounded by golden light. That's when a mysterious figure appears, floating before the massive Hydra. And it's none other than our protagonist, the Thunder Emperor. His awe-inspiring presence makes the hunters wonder if he might be a god. Floating in midair, the protagonist finally comes face to face with the boss monster. Without wasting time, he asks the creature if it realizes what it did wrong and demands an apology. The Hydra, however, remains silent and counterattacks, using all its heads at once. The young man is unfazed and comments that he expected that kind of reaction. With lightning crackling in his hands, he says the creature is begging for a beating. He then lands a blow on one of the heads while furiously shouting about the broken laptop. Fueled by rage, he strikes another head and blames the monster for the loss of his manuscript. Right after, he unleashes a barrage of attacks and challenges the creature to handle it. Even so, he says everything still feels like a dead end. The Hydra stares him down as he positions himself for another strike, thinking about his debut. The reason for so much anger was precisely his debut, and he releases all his power at once. That's when a massive pillar of light descends from the sky and hits the creature directly. Even after annihilating the monster, the hero still looks irritated with the whole situation. Now his concern is the tight deadline and how he'll rewrite everything in time. The other hunters wake up completely confused, with no idea what just happened. Shortly after, they find their captain lying on the ground and run toward him to help. One of them checks his vitals and suggests waiting for rescue, but the other points to something in the distance. They then spot the Hydra's carcass on the ground, stunned by the fact that the monster was defeated. Looking more closely, one of the hunters notices a strange mark and believes the creature fell from a single blow. At that moment, both quickly turn around with shocked expressions on their faces. They stare at the fallen captain, trying to imagine what really happened there. Then we see a reporter announcing the opening of the A-rank portal and the appearance of the Triple Hydra. Despite being a colossal threat, a mysterious hunter managed to defeat it alone. He reveals that the hero in question is Captain Masaki, also known as the Tractor. The video of the battle went viral and confirmed that the captain was the one who defeated the monster and saved everyone. Now he'll need 14 weeks to recover, having suffered damage to his vocal cords. According to the doctors, the injury was caused by a shouted curse during a decisive moment in the fight. In a meeting room, everyone watches the footage of the battle against the giant Hydra attentively. A man in a suit declares that they need to recruit the captain immediately for the Guardian Guild. Although some disagree, others argue that his power is elite and his pride as a Guardian is clear. Meanwhile, a woman with red eyes watches everything angrily, thinking about the protagonist, Tae-ayan. She internally questions what he did to cause so much chaos in the city. Right after, she complains out loud about how the young man doesn't know his limits. The hunter fears that if Chief Do-wang finds out the truth, the situation could get even worse. At that moment, the guildmaster raises the question of whether everyone there truly believes that story. This is Do-wang, leader of the Guardian Guild, who says he doesn't see any logic in what happened. The woman then realizes they were quickly discovered by their superior. Faced with the situation, the guild chief turns to her and asks for her opinion on the matter. Surprised, the hunter pretends not to understand the hint and tries to change the subject. Do-wang comments that the story reminds him of a legendary hunter from the past. He believes that this missing hero may now be revealing his true identity. That's why he decides he will personally seek out the Thunder Emperor for a conversation. We then see our writer in a moment of intense tension. He is sitting at a table across from an important and enigmatic man. At that moment, the man addresses him as author Tae-ayan, and the young man responds nervously. The man then slams the table while holding a tablet, showing clear irritation. This is editor Gu Kyungmo, who says there's no way to publish the story in its current state. He criticizes the work for lacking engagement and feeling too forced. He warns the author that if things continue like this, readers will lose interest and abandon the book. Tae-ayan tries to argue by describing a scene, but he's immediately interrupted by the editor. The editor scolds him, saying he didn't ask for a detailed breakdown of events. Instead, he brings up the news about the hunter who almost died recently in a portal. With that, he suggests the young man imagines someone risking everything to protect others. In the editor's vision, the captain faces the Hydra alone while his subordinates scream his name. He then asks how desperate and intense that battle must have been for the hero. That's why everyone would remember the hunter's name and the act of bravery he carried out. It's at that moment people would understand his emotions and create posters to honor him. With this, the editor explains that this is empathy and engagement. This is the realism that's missing. The author finally recognizes his flaw, lowers his head, and apologizes for not realizing it sooner. Seeing that he took the criticism to heart, the editor grants one more week to revise the story. The young man thanks him enthusiastically and promises to do his best to deliver something worthy. On the other side of the door, the editor agrees but gives the author a serious warning. He states that if the story doesn't improve, the contract will be permanently terminated. Our writer is left speechless, shocked by the possibility of suddenly losing everything. Outside, the writer lets out a deep sigh full of frustration after the meeting. When he gets home, his younger brother sees him and bluntly calls him a loser. The young man then collapses onto the couch, consumed by exhaustion and hopelessness. Annoyed by the sigh, the brother reacts with irritation and yells at the situation. He slaps the writer on the back and complains that he's going to sink the floor if he keeps it up. The young man asks what's going on while the author pleads for his little brother's help. Distressed, the writer says he might be on the verge of being fired. Right after, the boy asks if the contract will be terminated if the revision doesn't meet expectations. He states that the story needs to be more realistic, but the author admits he doesn't know how to achieve that. Curious, the brother wants to know what was written before, and the author lights out the chance to explain. He shares that he wrote a scene where 30 A-rank monsters are defeated at once, but it was considered over the top. Upon hearing this, the brother sighs, clearly exhausted by the idea presented. He then asks if the writer has ever been in a real fight. The young man feels offended and says yes, but the brother insists on knowing when that happened. That's when he remembers the Chaos Gate and the battle that lasted 72 hours. The brother, however, isn't impressed and says that wasn't a good example. He explains that there are only 12 legendary hunters on the entire planet. He adds that most hunters fall between ranks F and C, being considerably weaker. He also points out that A-rank hunters are already viewed as powerful and financially successful. S-ranks, on the other hand, are on a level equal to or above the CEOs of the world's largest corporations. That's why the boy questions whether anyone could truly relate to a hero so far removed from reality. He argues that readers prefer to follow protagonists they can row alongside. In light of that, the brother asks the author what would be necessary to create that kind of narrative. In response, he shouts that it takes research and observation of how regular hunters really fight. Our protagonist, however, remembers that he's no longer a hunter and has no idea where to begin. Desperate, he grabs his brother and pleads for support. The boy then suggests he reach out to the Korean Hunters Association for help. He also reminds the author that he is the Thunder Emperor, the only legendary hunter in Korea. On his knees, the hero regains awareness of his true identity. At that moment, he recalls that he is the Thunder Emperor as a large building appears before him. With that, the narrative shifts to the Hunters Association, where President Park Dae-han is visibly irritated. He complains that the association has always successfully led portal strikes within the country. He also mentions having sent support to France when his city was at risk. He recalls they even assisted Germany in training their hunters. Despite this track record, he is outraged by the rejection of Korea's rank promotion. The other party says there's nothing that can be done, and the president calls this unacceptable. The Indian representative argues that the issue is the absence of a legendary hunter in the country. According to him, 11 nations are able to maintain their legendary heroes, while Korea has lost that status. He reminds everyone that the Thunder Emperor retired suddenly and without explanation. The Korean president tries to defend the decision, claiming it was a personal choice, but is accused of making excuses. The Indian delegate insists that only countries with legendary hunters can achieve the highest rank. As a last appeal, the Korean president asks for at least a promotion to second rank, but the meeting is adjourned. Thus, Korea's rank issue is postponed and the long meeting finally comes to an end. Alone in the room, the president slams the table in frustration. As he leaves, he grabs a folder and mutters insults, calling the other leaders traitors. Furious, he throws some papers, recalling how all the countries they once helped are now abandoning them. He asks what the next appointment is, and his assistant informs him there's a meeting with the Scorpion Guild. The staff member then explains that the guild has a bad reputation and controls high-level portals. Worried, he warns that this partnership could damage the association's image. The president, however, states that as a hunters association, it must engage with everyone. Even in his thoughts, he admits he doesn't like the idea and expects backlash from other guilds. At that moment, he hears raised voices and orders being given to remove someone causing a disturbance in the lobby. A security guard approaches and informs him that a young man is demanding to speak with him. The president scoffs, thinking even store clerks now believe they have authority. Right after, the guard mentions the store Taejongdae and the leader is caught off guard. He turns and asks for the name to be repeated, trying to confirm what he heard. That's when he realizes it's Tae-ayen, the Thunder Emperor. Gripped by urgency, he says he'll go down immediately to meet him, and he orders his subordinates not to let the hunter leave under any circumstances. Meanwhile, a car pulls up in front of the association headquarters. At the entrance, the master of the Scorpion Guild, Jo Jin Nam, praises the grandeur of the building. Inside the facility, people comment that accepting the meeting shows the president's prestige. The assistant then welcomes the guild master, who takes pride in his generous donations. At that moment, the president appears running through the halls, visibly in a hurry. The man with the braid tries to greet him and start a conversation, but receives no response. The president rushes past him and demands that they clear the way. He also scolds the assistant for almost letting someone so important walk out. He finally finds the hero and apologizes for the delay in seeing him. He then asks the reason for the visit, and the writer replies that he has something important to say. Hearing this, the president is filled with hope and considers that the hero might be returning. He thinks that the Thunder Emperor still cares about the association. However, the young man clarifies that he actually just wanted to visit the place. Next, the president becomes excited, thinking there's a hidden meaning behind the request and promises to arrange everything. But he's confused when he realizes it's simply a request for a guided tour. With a slight smile, the hero says he wants to observe up close how regular hunters operate. Then he extends his hand to the president and makes a proposal. He promises to do anything the leader of the association asks of him. We see the Hunters Association building where the terms of the contract are being summarized. The agreement is that the association will help him with his research, and in exchange, he will act as the Thunder Emperor. So the young man asks if there's a good way to observe, and the president excitedly says yes. With that, he thinks that with the hero in action, Korea's rank will rise on the global stage. To that end, the association leader presents an F-rank portal assistant badge to the young man. The writer looks confused, and the president explains that it's a job for low-rank hunters. Their main job is basically to retrieve loot from portals that other hunters have already cleared. They're also responsible for ensuring escape routes in case of emergencies. And if it's really necessary, they can participate a little in the fighting. But most of the time, they rarely need to fight and mostly wait in the back. Then the president concludes that it's the perfect job to observe regular hunters. The hero is surprised and happy, realizing he didn't know something like this even existed, and thinks it's the ideal idea. He thanks him, saying it's exactly what he was looking for, and the president is surprised by his reaction. Then he jumps out the window, asking them to send the details to the convenience store. The assistant finds him strange, but the president says he's still Korea's only hope. Our protagonist arrives excited at his new workplace. He looks up the building sign and sees the name of the place where he'll be working. Turns out he was assigned to the Gawon Manson Guild, the C-rank guild. The writer is determined to learn about the real world of hunters. He opens the door and introduces himself as the new portal assistant. But he's surprised to find the room messy and with 3 guys lounging around. One of the hunters is on his phone, looking extremely bored with everything. Another man reading a magazine gets startled and asks if a portal has opened. The young man explains that it's not a portal, and the man remembers it was today. Then the hunter apologizes for the mess, and the writer thinks, so this is a real guild. With that, the man introduces himself as Mansong, the guild leader, and extends his hand. Our hero shakes his hand and introduces himself to the guild master as well. The leader says the members are just him and the guy on the couch. and the young man asks about the third one. At that moment, the guild master explains that the third member is on a temporary mission. Hearing that, the writer imagines it's like one of the 12 apostles being dispatched to another country. But the guild leader says the guy just got unlucky and invites him to sit down. Excited, the writer asks why, while the other hunter asks what he thinks of the place. At that moment, the guy on the couch explains that they're stuck in C rank and barely managing to stay afloat. The leader gets annoyed at his companion's honesty while the author watches with interest. Then the young man comments that the two seem very close, like longtime comrades. They admit they've been through a lot together, but are getting tired of each other. Our writer gets excited and starts taking notes, thinking, so this is what real hunters are like. With that, the guild leader asks if they really come across that way to a newbie, and the other agrees. Full of enthusiasm, the young man says their teamwork must be amazing and asks about the raid. But the two hunters glance at each other awkwardly and reveal that the guild has no raid plans. At that moment, the author is completely shocked by the news and even drops his notebook in surprise. Trembling, he asks if this really counts as a guild, and the leader explains that weak guilds don't get called for raids. So the young man asks what he should do, and Mansong replies that there's nothing to be done. But the writer gets excited, saying this is the reality he was looking for and asks for any task. With that, the other members suggest he clean the room, but the leader reminds him it's his turn. Faced with that, the writer offers to clean, and the other hunter says he's making the newbie do his work. With a determined look, the author thinks he has 1 week to find inspiration. With 6 days left until the deadline, the young man arrives excited and asks what he should do. At that moment, the guild leader suggests he clean the hallway, and the young man happily agrees. The next day, with 5 days remaining, the author arrives with the same enthusiasm. He asks if there will be a raid, but the other member says if there were, it wouldn't be there. So the writer asks for a task, and the hunter hands him a cloth to clean with. With that, the young man spends the rest of the day scrubbing the office windows. 3 days before the contract ends, the protagonist shows up looking a little tired. Mansong greets him with a broom in hand for another day of guild cleaning. The young man's expression shows that his initial excitement is already fading. With 2 days left, the author is cleaning the floor and thinking he's completely screwed. He reflects that on the first day it made sense, but now things are going overboard. Soon after, the office is sparkling, but he complains that that's all he's done all week. Desperate, he screams because he hasn't written anything, and the deadline is almost up. Then the scene shifts to the Golden Label publishing building at night. Inside the office, the editor works alone, focused on his computer. Suddenly, a hand appears and places a drink in front of him, leaving him confused. His colleague asks if he's working overtime because of that newbie. He compliments the editor's series and doesn't understand why he's bothering with a newcomer. He says he heard the newbie doesn't write well, and the editor agrees. He doesn't even know why he helped him, but he recalls that there was something like a desperate hope in the young man's writing. He looks at the screen and thinks this is his last and faint hope. With only 1 day left on the contract, the author feels completely defeated. The word count of his current manuscript is exactly 0. At this moment, our boy Tae-Hean is in a really tough spot. On the last day of his contract, he's in despair, thinking everything is lost. He worries about being fired and fears he won't publish anything for 10 years. But suddenly, the guild leader announces an emergency portal strike. Our author is confused by the news and can barely react at first. Then the young man becomes euphoric and shouts with excitement about finally going on an attack. He celebrates that he'll finally see a real battle and have something to write about. But he notices the hunters are serious and asks why they look so worried. Then the other member explains that it's a B-rank portal, and Tae-Aeon thinks that sounds super easy. The member then reveals that's why 3 guilds will cooperate to clear the portal. In response, the writer thinks that lowers the danger, and the leader somewhat agrees, though still tense. But the guild master says with a worried look that the problem is their partner guild. At that moment, the scene shifts to the Wolf Valley, where a blue portal is open in the mountains. The leader complains about the portal's location, but his partner sees it as a good work opportunity. Meanwhile, our writer watches the other hunters, and one of them asks what he does. The hunters in the guild glance at the author, and one of them assumes he's doing research. Suddenly, a mocking voice sounds from behind them, and a giant man appears. This is Richard Bear, leader of the Boldom Guild, and he greets Mansong sarcastically. The big guy calls him the philanthropist of the guild world, and Mansong gets annoyed with him. In response, the Boldom leader mocks him for training rookies well just for other guilds to steal them. With a mocking smile, he says only a fool would train his members for others. Right after, Mansong's partner gets irritated and asks who steals his rookies and still dares to complain. Then the hunter confronts him, saying that besides stealing members, now he also wants to fight. Richard grabs him, calling him a brat, but the partner responds that all he wants is a fight. A third guild leader appears and finds their argument both pathetic and hilarious. With a smile, he asks if they can really afford to waste energy before the attack. Richard replies that inside the portal, he'll be too busy to complain about support. So Mariong threatens them, saying they better do their job if they want any leftovers. Watching the argument, our author thinks the whole situation is completely insane. Then he gets excited and writes everything down in his notebook, thinking this is true reality. A spiky-haired guy hits the author's head and tells him to introduce himself. He complains that rookies are slow and threatens the writer not to mess with his monsters. At that moment, our protagonist stares back with a serious and utterly intimidating look. The spiky-haired youth gets startled and is shocked by the writer's aura. But Tae-Hyan bows nervously and says he'll be careful to work well with him. In his notebook, the writer notes that even the assistants have a power struggle. At that moment, Mansong calls the rookie and warns that they're already entering the portal. Soon after, the guild leader tells the boy to be careful not to get taken out in there. Inside the portal, a wolf monster attacks and the master prepares for battle. But Richard Bear arrives full force and lands a powerful blow on the fierce creature. The big guy's punch is so strong that he defeats the monster with a single hit. Mansong calls him dangerous, but Richard snaps back saying he's too slow. Meanwhile, Marion appears and easily defeats another wolf monster that shows up. His guild partner then orders everyone to quickly finish the fight at once. Richard Bear finishes off another creature with a very powerful blow. Soon after, the big guy sarcastically apologizes to a guy he almost hit mid-battle. Our author is shocked by the scene and wonders if this is what a normal battle looks like. At that moment, chaos erupts as hunters fight both the monsters and each other. Two of them argue over who defeated a wolf first and start shoving each other. Another hunter threatens a teammate who got in his way during the confusion. Thus, the writer watches everything and thinks he's never seen such a ridiculous battle in his life. Meanwhile, Marion smiles, finding the whole situation very convenient and easy. He explains that's why having exclusive attack rights is always the best option. His strategy is to let others deal with the weak and focus only on the boss monster. With a confident smile, he says everything is happening right on time. At that moment, the portal boss, a giant and ferocious wolf, emerges for battle. Immediately, the Mantis Guild members draw their swords and prepare to face the creature. With that, their leader believes defeating the boss will secure his promotion to rank A. He boasts that he's not on the same level as the other insect guilds. Then Marion and his men launch a full-on attack on the boss and quickly defeat it. The Mantis Guild leader leaps and attacks the giant wolf with his swords. With that, the monster is struck by several energy slashes and seems to be defeated. The giant creature collapses to the ground, appearing to have finally been taken down by the hunter. Marion steps on the monster's body and celebrates the amazing feeling of the slash. He boasts that he finally tasted success with this victory. With an evil grin, he says no one will be able to look down on him now. But an even bigger and more terrifying wolf emerges from the shadows behind him. The members of the Mantis Guild look at the new creature, completely shocked, and they realize the creature is a dire wolf, far more powerful. Richard is startled and wonders why an A-rank monster is there. Then the creature attacks with its claws, launching several hunters away with a blow. The Mantis leader is injured and left speechless by the monster's power. A hand appears before him and he freezes in fear, unable to believe what he's seeing. Desperate, one of them shouts for everyone to run because the gate has changed. The gate change brought unexpected and far stronger monsters than usual. Then Richard Bear recognizes the creature and confirms it is an A-rank dire wolf. For B-rank hunters, facing an A-rank opponent is an almost impossible barrier to overcome. With that, panic takes over and everyone runs for their lives. The survival rate of the hunters there is far lower than expected. One of the beasts attacks mercilessly, and a hunter is caught off guard. Then the wolves advance on the fallen members without any mercy. That same guy who picked on the author now screams desperately for help. Marion is in shock, not understanding what happened, and wonders why this is happening. He thinks about all the effort he made to get there, and now everything is lost. Desperate, the man screams that he can't die like this and charges for the target. But the creature strikes him with a powerful blast and sends him flying. The wolves continue the massacre, hunting down the remaining hunters. Another member pleads for his life as one of the beasts approaches. His terrified screams echo through the area, but there's no one left to help him. Soon after, the big guy pushes everyone aside and yells desperately for them to get out of his way. In the midst of the chaos, one of the hunters tries to calm everyone and asks them to pull themselves together. Mansong takes control and says the association has already been alerted to the danger. He says that if they can escape and hide, the rescue team will arrive soon. Then the guildmaster shouts for everyone to run while he holds off the monsters alone. One of the hunters recognizes the leader of Gawa and is shocked by his heroic act. He thanks him and runs away, saying he's sorry but needs to protect his family. The leader knows he won't win but hopes his sacrifice will allow the others to escape. With a determined look, he prepares for battle, trying to buy time for the others. But his partner appears, calling him chief and saying he's playing hero by himself. With a smile, he says that if that's the case, they should at least fight together in style. Mansong asks if he's okay with this, and a friend tells him to stop acting like a hero. Right after, the master turns to our author and tells the rookie to run while he still can, apologizing with a smile for bringing the writer to such a dangerous place. Our protagonist looks at him seriously and says he finally understands everything now. He watches the battle and thinks that some survive while others aren't as lucky. At that moment, a mysterious golden energy begins to radiate from his body, finally understanding that this is a battlefield where you fight just to stay alive. With a smile, he thanks everyone for finally showing him the truth. Meanwhile, in the battle, the two leaders are thrown back by the monster's power. Mansong on the ground gets frustrated for missing a strike and tells his partner to run. But suddenly, a golden light catches his attention and he looks up, shocked. At that moment, the leader sees the rookie walking toward danger and calls out in fear. Then our author removes his glasses and with blonde hair says the investigation has begun. His eyes glow with a new color and he announces that the analysis is complete. With that, electric energy surrounds him and he unleashes the Thunder Wheel ability. A triangular lightning attack strikes the wolves with full force. The ability forms a magic circle and uses only 5% of its power. The guild leader can't believe what he's seeing and wonders what the hell that is. With a smile, our author gives a thumbs up and gets excited about the power he just used. But the guildmaster desperately warns him about the giant monster behind him. At that moment, the boy thanks the leaders for everything he learned from them in that situation. They wonder if the rookie was the Thunder Emperor, but the boy just wants to leave. So Taehan asks them to keep his powers a secret and take care of their injuries. With that, the writer disappears into a portal of energy, leaving the two behind. Confused, the two hunters stand still, not understanding anything they just saw. Soon after, the rescue team arrives and confirms the explosion, finding 2 survivors. Back in the normal world, the news spreads about the unexpected gate shift. Fortunately, the hunters at the scene were successfully rescued by the support team. Then we see the editor in his office, with 1 minute left before the contract expires. At that moment, his phone vibrates on the desk with an important notification on the screen. On the screen, we see he's submitting the first episode of his manuscript to the editor. With that, the editor receives the message and is shocked that he sent it at the last minute. Then he begins to read the text and hopes that this time it's at least a little better. After finishing the read, the editor is completely stunned. He thinks the text is surprisingly good. A few days later, the scene shows a red-haired young man breathing a sigh of relief. With arms wide open, he shouts for everyone to hear that he's finally back. A child points at him and asks if he's a hunter, but the mother tells her not to stare. Smiling, Yongsik thinks his seniors will be shocked by his return. He remembers it's been 6 months since he was sent to train with a B-rank guild. Even though he faced great challenges, all of it contributed to his growth. After training day and night without rest, he finally managed to overcome everyone. The young man appears victorious, standing over a pile of monsters, having pushed beyond his D-rank limits. He imagines being celebrated by the Goa Guild veterans as a true hero. But when he arrives at the guild entrance, he finds the silence and lack of welcome strange. At that moment, the young man thinks maybe it's a surprise party and decides to play along. With an excited smile, he opens the door and shouts to the veterans that he's back. However, the room is empty and only our protagonist stares at him from his desk. Not understanding a thing, they both look at each other and ask at the same time who the other is. The protagonist introduces himself as Tae Ayan and says he's just a gate assistant. The red-haired guy points at him and says assistants are F rank, the lowest of all. With a smug smile, he boasts that he's just been promoted to rank C. Our author offers with a smile to teach the veteran a few things. The scene then shifts to the 2 guild leaders walking down the street, talking about the Thunder Emperor. Hearing this, a partner panics and grabs the master, horrified that they made the Emperor clean the place. The leader then remembers and asks why the hero was even at their guild in the first place. He says the Emperor revealed his identity and they'll probably never see him again. His partner says that's disappointing and imagines the benefits of having him in the guild. With that, the master gets irritated and grabs him angrily, calling him an idiot for thinking that way. He yells and asks if his friend doesn't realize how dangerous that situation was. Right after, the other replies that he almost died, but the leader is still furious at his attitude. He explains that the gate shift was caused by the immense power of the rookie. The master becomes desperate, thinking any mission with him could be a matter of life and death. His friend pushes him and says he doesn't want the killer emperor in the guild under any circumstances. Annoyed, the partner opens the door and says he was just speaking hypothetically. Then the partner pulls him back in and yells for him to repeat that the Thunder Emperor never. But he's interrupted by the redhead, who yells at our author that in the world of hunters, F rank is nothing. He says not to worry because with his luck, he'll train him into an A-rank hunter. Our protagonist smiles and agrees that mastering the basics is the most important thing of all. With that, the leaders return and grab the redhead, saying that the basics start with cleaning. Soon after, the young man smiles and greets the veterans, not realizing they're driving him away. Then one of the leaders smacks him with an arm to stop him from being so full of himself. Angry, the veterans hold him down and shout for him to shut up once and for all. Our author watches this scene with a smile and thinks that this place is really interesting. The scene then shifts to the editor, who praises the manuscript and its much improved realism. He's impressed with the desperation in the story and says that if the author keeps improving, the protagonist's debut will no longer be a problem. The word debut echoes in our author's mind, and he can barely believe what he just heard. A fiery aura surrounds him, and he celebrates that his chance has finally come. He thinks that joining the guild was the right choice to make his debut happen. Soon after, the veterans observe the author writing something down with a dark aura, and one of them asks what he's writing. Frightened, they believe he's creating a death list and recording all their sins. Our author then says he has something for them, and the 2 leaders are completely terrified by the announcement. The young man approaches the fiery aura, and they fear the writer is about to strike them with lightning. The leader screams in desperation that he has a family, but Taeyan simply hands him a portable authorization slip. The guildmaster is confused, but our author suggests they challenge the guild as a 4-man team with the redhead. Faced with this, the leader realizes that if Yongsik joins the team, his partner will have to go along too. With a smile, Taeyan announces that moreover, he wants to officially join Gawa Mansashan. At that moment, the guildmaster is completely shocked by the unexpected request and screams in horror of the news. The scene shifts outside where the red-haired young man sits discouraged on the sidewalk. Back inside, the author explains that for the sake of his research, he needs to become part of the team. The leader says he understands the reasoning of the Thunder Emperor, or rather, of Taeyan. He also understands the boy's desire to join, but thinks it's a bit much for the Thunder Emperor. But his partner grabs him and yells furiously that he already warned him this wasn't a joke. With a serious look, the other leader replies that he's not joking about this either. Then his partner asks the leader if he remembers the old days of the guild. He recalls when 5 strangers first came together with their swords. After that, the group grew to 20 members, and they had a great time dreaming big. But as Richard predicted, people left one by one to face reality. Over time, they settled into a comfortable routine, but without much excitement. That's why the partner says that deep down, the master regrets not chasing their dream. So he places a hand on the chief's shoulder and says he wants to help with that, thinking the boy in front of them is just someone trying to achieve his dream, and that this is a great opportunity for their guild to finally move forward. He questions whether they shouldn't give it another chance, also for Jiho's sake. With that, the leader makes his decision and tells the protagonist they'll accept the challenge. Our author clarifies that he is just Tae Ayan, a writer and gate assistant. The chief is stunned by the news and covers his mouth in complete shock. He quietly looks at photos of his family and former guild members. With a smile, he reflects and says to himself that this all feels like a dream. Our protagonist allows the redhead to join, calling him the Rookie. He shows excitement to work with him, just as a black van pulls up in front. Behind the wheel, a mysterious man in his suit confidently confirms what he's seeing. Then the man reveals that the assistant mentioned by a guild master has finally been found. At a cafe, our author types about turning someone into an A-rank hunter. With a smile, he thinks the phrase he wrote is perfect for his manuscript. One of the staff members asks what the young man does, and the older one tells him to leave him alone. At that moment, someone walks in asking if sales are going up. Suddenly, a man in a suit enters the cafe, and they all greet him. The younger employee is shocked to recognize the newcomer. They realize the man is Master Do Wang, a very important figure. The master says he needs to speak with the young man and asks them to clear the shop. He offers a briefcase full of money, and the employee agrees instantly. With that, his men begin removing all the customers from the establishment. Facing Tai Ayan, the mysterious man says he ran away from him. With a sinister smile, he says he's finally able to find him. A purple aura surrounds the place, and our author senses the danger, lowering his headphones. Suddenly, the master appears behind the writer with his aura enveloping him. He looks at him with a smile and says they still have unfinished business. Then the older man hugs him warmly and calls him the Thunder Emperor. With a smile, he says he missed his boy terribly. But our author uses his lightning to push him away, leaving the master stunned. In his hero form, he warns that he's writing and asks not to be disturbed. Faced with that, the man composes himself with a smile and says he's still as stiff as ever. He then warns that this time he won't let it slide, and the young man looks confused. The master gets annoyed and asks why he's been avoiding him since he retired, but the writer complains that he calls all the time and won't even let him sleep properly. Faced with that, the older man yells that if he showed up once in a while, he wouldn't have to call so much. He asks if it's right to treat his grandfather that way, but the young man denies they're related. Our author tries to send him away, saying he needs to get back to writing. But the master sits down and says he has only one question. He wants to know why. With a serious look, he asks why the writer went back to being a hunter. But the protagonist ignores him and stays focused on his work at the computer. So the older man changes the subject and brings up the shoes he ordered. He explains they're a limited edition from the Guardian Guild, with only 100 pairs in the world. At that, the author gets irritated and slams his laptop shut, shouting that he gets it. He then explains he returned to fieldwork to research material for his novel and made an agreement with Mr. Park Dayan. The master is shocked at the deal with the association president and asks why he didn't join the Guardian Guild. In response, the writer says he doesn't want to go there because it's too powerful and disconnected from reality. Tae Hayan explains that someone born a star wouldn't understand the real world, and that's why his editor criticized him. The master gets upset and offers him the position of successor in the Guardian Guild, but the young man interrupts, saying he already has a guild. The older man is stunned, and the writer repeats that he's already part of a guild and tells him to stop with the successor talk. The master starts to laugh in a slightly sinister and unsettling way. He gets excited, thinking about merging the young man's guild with his own, but the writer tells him to stop the creepy talk. Our protagonist warns that he just joined and will be keeping an eye on him, but the man agrees in a rather mocking tone. At that moment, the man puts a hand on his shoulder and calls him seriously by name. The young man gets annoyed and asks what he wants now, but the older man says it's something important. He warns that now that he's back, it's only a matter of time before someone discovers his identity, which could be dangerous. Our protagonist says he's not afraid of that, but the man responds that the danger isn't for him. The older man warns that the real danger is to those around him, since they're not as strong. A memory appears of the blonde-haired hero sitting atop the body of a giant creature. The expression on the young man's face in the memory is one of deep loneliness and sorrow over what happened. The man looks at him and asks what else could happen, trying to get him to talk about his past. Right after, the master tells him to work hard and invites him to the Guardian Guild if everything falls apart. Leaving the cafe, the older man smiles and thinks it was good to see the writer again. He notices that the protagonist finally looks a bit more alive after all this time. Outside, he asks his secretary, Kim, how much the cafe acquisition cost. Then with a smile, he wonders how much it would cost to buy an entire publishing house. At that moment, the man steps into his luxury car and the door shuts with a heavy thud. Holding a report with the author's photo, he says the target was with Mr. Do Wang. The leader reads the document and finds it suspicious that so many people are involved with a mere F rank. He finds it strange that Do Wang treats him like a grandson, since he's known for being cold. He begins to sweat nervously at the possibility that the young man really is his relative. Just then, the target exits the cafe and the agent prepares to act, but the chief yells for him to stop. Panicked, he shouts to cancel the mission and warns that the target they were about to hit is. But it's already too late, and a speeding car slams into our author. His glasses fly through the air as the leader screams that was Do Wang's grandson. The man in the suit asks in disbelief if the author was really Do Wang's grandson, dropping his phone. Right after, he runs off in a panic, shouting that he didn't know. In the car, the two henchmen smile, thinking they've taken the target out. However, to their shock, Tai Edion appears in front of the vehicle without a single scratch. He stands still for a moment, trying to process what just happened. Then his eyes glow with a blue light, and the men in the car call him a monster. One of them jumps out of the car, questioning whether the author was really just F rank, while the other yells at him to finish the job. Ian complains about the car and remembers that his mom always told him not to walk while looking at his phone. With no time to think, the two assassins rush to attack the young man, who is still distracted. But our boy dodges the attack Matrix style. The men are shocked as the author's hands, glowing with energy, grab their faces. Then a massive explosion of energy bursts from his hands directly into the henchman. The force of the blast sends the two assassins flying, his blonde hair now revealed. He unveils his Thunder Emperor form with blonde hair and glowing eyes. But the young man looks at himself in shock, surprised that he used his powers again. Our boy returns to normal and realizes he acted on instinct and asks if the guys are okay. He gets nervous and looks around to see if anyone saw, but then hears some shouting. It's a group of girls excitedly screaming Do Wang's name nearby. With a sigh of relief, he thinks that sometimes having a famous grandfather is pretty useful. Still, he wonders why those hunters suddenly attacked him. At that moment, the young man decides he'll ask Mr. Daehan about it. Soon after, the two men are taken away in an ambulance to the hospital. In an office, Daehan apologizes and says he didn't expect them to go that far. The man in glasses looks irritated and complains that those guys don't know when to stop. Our author asks if he knows them, and the president confirms they're total scum. Seeing all this, the man grows visibly angry. Then our author's eyes glow with blue energy, showing his anger. This makes the president a little nervous, and he reveals that the attackers were from the Scorpion Guild. He explains they're a dangerous guild that emerged after the hero retired, and that their leader is Jo Jin Nam, a man who doesn't care what he has to do to get what he wants. Daehan explains that he rejected an offer from the villain because of the writer, so the attack was revenge. Faced with this, the president gets angry and says that since he couldn't attack him directly, he targeted the author, just a simple F rank, and apologizes for accepting him. However, Tad Avion says it's okay, and a powerful golden aura suddenly surrounds him completely. The president's assistant panics, feeling his heart nearly explode just being near the young man's energy. He grips his clothes tightly, feeling the crushing pressure of the immense aura. At that moment, the golden energy radiating from the boy fills the entire room with overwhelming power. Then the president finally realizes that this is the form of the legendary Thunder Emperor. Desperate, the man in glasses shouts for the writer to please calm down a little. The president tries frantically to reassure the blonde hero about his guild. Then he begs for Ayan's forgiveness, while our author thinks this is completely insane. With a wicked smile, he thinks this is the peak of realism he's been chasing for his novel. Back to normal, he explains that the protagonist overcomes this and grows stronger, leaving Daehan stunned. Now excited by the idea, the author thinks this would be awesome in the story. Enthusiastic, he says the president can just leave things as they are. The president, in disbelief, asks if he's being serious. Our author gets even more excited and says that from now on, things are going to get a lot more interesting. Meanwhile, at the Scorpion Guild, the leader yells furiously at his men for not canceling the operation. He complains that not only did they fail miserably, they ended the day in an ambulance. One of the henchmen tries to explain, saying they thought the target had a bodyguard. But before he can finish the sentence, the villain punches him square in the face. With the force of the blow, the henchman is thrown across the room with no chance to defend himself. Furious, the leader mocks them, asking if the so-called bodyguard was the Thunder Emperor. Jidnan shouts that they're useless for failing to handle just one kid. Angrily, he sits in his chair and calls all his men idiots. He realizes the real problem now is Do Wang, who will definitely act if the boy is truly his grandson. An image of the powerful Do Wang, master of the Guardian Guild, appears in the villain's mind. He then looks at the author's report and says that since the damage is already done, he won't stop now. He asks if the boy has a guild, and the henchman confirms it's a C rank one. The leader orders them to buy out all the portals the author's guild tries to claim and isolate him. With a sinister smile, he says he's going all in, and that he still has one more thing in mind. Faced with this, the villain reveals his plan to kidnap a relative of the author, and we see the target standing in the street. Meanwhile, two henchmen observe her and comment on how much the world has improved. Distracted by her phone, the girl walks down the street thinking about the movie she'll watch at home. At that moment, the villain's men suddenly appear and surround the distracted girl. With no chance to react, they grab her and order that she be taken away. The victim is dragged off without understanding anything, completely confused by the situation. Then it finally clicks, and the girl realizes she's being kidnapped by the men. Already inside the car, she can't believe this is happening and thinks it's all ridiculous. At an abandoned warehouse at night, the villains prepare for their plan. With a grin, the henchmen look at the hostage they've just captured for their boss. Then the leader of the Scorpion Guild says it doesn't matter how strong the Thunder Emperor is. He believes the hero would never resort to something as low as kidnapping someone close to him. That way, the villain knows the Guardian Guild could crush them. But now, they have a chance. With an evil smile, he thinks that if the hero cares about his grandchild, then he's just like them. The man believes that with the relative as a hostage, the hero won't be able to use his full strength. Thus, the boss plans to use this to control the Guardian Guild and become the strongest in Korea. But he gets confused because he's never heard of the Thunder Emperor having a granddaughter. Curious, the villain decides to look at the hostage's face and removes her hood. As he does, the girl's glasses fall, revealing a serious expression. Startled, the leader screams the girl's name. She's actually the powerful Crimson Flame. With a sly smile, the mysterious hostage ignites her flames and stares mockingly at the villain. She easily burns through the ropes and asks what the Thunder Emperor has to do with this. The leader falls to the floor in terror and yells for his men to wait before attacking. Then the red-haired woman says they clearly have business with her guild master and asks what's next. With a wicked smile, she says it's her first time being kidnapped and asks them to make it more fun. Meanwhile, a purple portal opens and someone excitedly yells that the day has finally come. One of the author's guild members tells the rookie to watch closely because he's about to show the real ace. Right after, Taeyeon writes in his notebook and thinks his teammate talks just like a manga protagonist. The guildmaster and another member find the guy getting weirder by the day and feel uncomfortable. Then Taeyeon calls out to the guildmaster. Smiling, he thanks him for accepting him, saying it was the right choice. The master replies that they're the ones who should be thankful, and the author doesn't understand why. He explains that the raid is only happening because of the permit Taeyeon brought last time. The leader says they have pride and tried to get a permit on their own, but the Scorpion Guild bought out all the raid permits they tried to acquire. With a serious look, our author repeats the name of the guild he just heard from the master. At that moment, the master notices his reaction and asks if he knows them, but the young man quickly denies it. The two companions glance at each other in confusion, wondering if they did something wrong, thinking the whole situation is strange. Just then, the guild's ace gets excited and calls everyone to jump into the purple portal. Our author looks serious, while the Yamsik says his blood is boiling and calls him to come along. With a sigh, the young man removes his glasses, looking a bit tired of it all. He thinks this whole situation is starting to get really boring. Suddenly, he looks at his phone with a completely confused expression. On his screen, he sees a photo of Crimson Flame with the caption, "Got kidnapped lol." In the chat, the cocky bastard jokes that it looks more like she did the kidnapping, and the girl curses him back. She then reveals that the kidnapper is the leader of the Scorpion Guild, which surprises the young man. With this new information, a slightly sinister smile appears on the author's face. He asks her for a favor in exchange for a wish voucher, and his sister is shocked that he even replied. Meanwhile, the Scorpion Guild villain flees in panic, thinking he almost died. A man shows up shouting about the chaos, saying he no longer understands anything that just happened. He says the leader got all worked up over a single girl and calls the whole thing humiliating. Then the villain yells at his henchmen for not recognizing the famous Crimson Flame. Jin now explains that the heroine turns everything to ash with her large-scale magic. He shouts that you don't earn an S rank with just good looks and tells them to be thankful they're still alive. The leader smokes in frustration, wondering how everything went wrong when all he wanted was to get rid of the author. Then the villain swears he'll retreat for now, but promises to settle the score with that bastard one day. But a voice tells them to stop, and to the leader's shock, it's Crimson Flame. The villain and his henchmen are stunned as the fire heroine walks toward them. Then with flames in her voice, she says she's changed her mind and won't let them leave this place. With a simple snap of her fingers, a massive wave of fire energy begins to release from her. An enormous surge of flames strikes the villain and his men with full force. She explains that Tae Aeon made a rare request, so she decided to hear what he had to say. The leader is frozen in shock as she asks if they mess with her little brother. Smiling, she warns them that pissing off that bastard is a job only she's allowed to do. A gigantic fire dragon's head forms and prepares to strike the guild leader. A massive pillar of flames shoots into the sky, destroying everything around it. In the end, the fire heroine thoroughly enjoys the explosion she just created. As the villains are blasted into the air, she smiles with excitement and thinks she felt like a true manga protagonist. As a result, the Crimson Flame kidnapping incident caused by the Scorpion Guild becomes news, and the guild is completely wiped out. In an office, a few people comment that it was basically a new form of suicide, and that arrogance got the better of that guild. A man looks at his phone with a serious expression, thinking about our author. He sees a message from the writer apologizing and promising to submit the manuscript by tomorrow, but he senses something is wrong. Meanwhile, at the center of the incident, our boy is fuming, while someone yells at him to get back to work. His sister flails and asks why Ayan asked her for a favor involving the Scorpion Guild. With a serious look, the author asks if the red-haired girl really wants to know. The fire heroine's eyes light up with excitement at his question. Then he tells her to use her wish voucher, and she becomes visibly irritated with the answer. He complains that he's already behind on the manuscript because of the Scorpion Guild, and now, because of a gorilla, he almost couldn't write anything else for his novel. Angrily, the fire heroine grabs the author by the neck and yells that he should die at the hands of the gorilla. Choking, the writer says he'll talk and that he doesn't need the voucher. The boy then reveals it's about his guild, prompting his sister to let him go. Out of breath, he says they were harassing his guild, which is why he asked the favor. He coughs on the floor non-stop while the girl watches him, still not fully understanding. Aeon complains that he nearly died without even finishing his novel, and his sister remains confused. After a moment of silence, the fire heroine asks about the guild in question. She then points at the writer and asks if he really joined a guild. The young man confirms that he joined one and asks her to keep it a secret for now. Suddenly, the red-haired girl runs off yelling for their parents, leaving her brother behind. The fire heroine Taizio celebrates while her brother curses at her, and then their parents tell them to eat in silence. Elsewhere, we see the guild's submaster greeting Tae Ayan, who just arrived. He asks about the gifts he brought, and the young man says they're thank you gifts from his parents. The sub-leader says one member is asleep and the other is late, and asks him to pass the message later. He then asks if the writer heard about Crimson Flame's kidnapping. Celebrating the event, he says it served them right for stealing their zones. Our author feels guilty and apologizes internally, since it all happened because of him. But the man seems thoughtful and says he's been reflecting on something strange. He asks if the boy thinks it's just a coincidence that their names were in the same incident. The sub says that Scorpion, an A-rank guild, stole their permissions and then kidnapped an S-rank. The boy hears his theory and becomes tense at the possibility of being found out. He panics, thinking that if they discover he's the cause of it all, he'll be kicked out. The man in suspenders says that putting the pieces together, there's only one possible conclusion. He approaches the writer with an intense gaze and grabs him by the shoulders, calling him the youngest. Faced with this, the author panics and promises it won't happen again, begging not to be expelled. But the sub cheerfully shows the permission and says there's only one explanation for all this. He believes the portal they were going to enter must have some incredible treasure hidden inside. With a smile, he celebrates their luck, since with Scorpion out, their permissions were restored. Then he shouts that now all that's left is for them to get rich, but is kicked by the guild master who wants to sleep. The guild leader complains that his friend is being pretentious and woke him up. The sub insists they fought hard for this, and the other tells them to hurry up because there's more work to do. Both dream that if they find the treasure, they can finally leave behind the mercenary life. Tae-eon sighs in relief for being scared over nothing, but his phone suddenly starts ringing. He sees a message from his editor asking for a quick meeting about the manuscript. At that moment, the author stares at his phone in shock and realizes it's 100% editor feedback. At a cafe, the writer meets with his editor for the important meeting. The editor says he read the manuscript and that there's been great improvement since they talked about canceling the contract. The young man thanks him embarrassed, but the man in glasses says he still has some concerns. With a serious look, the editor prepares to explain what's wrong with the novel. He asks when the protagonist is finally going to evolve into a B-rank hunter. Our author is confused, and the editor explains that his writing has become more realistic and engaging. But he points out that the story is full of everyday life and lacks a turning point for the protagonist's growth. The man explains that usually a protagonist starts out as an ordinary character and goes through hardships. By overcoming those trials, he becomes stronger, and readers enjoy that journey of growth. The writer asks if what's missing is a growth story, and the editor immediately confirms. He uses as an example the 12 apostles, who weren't strong at the beginning but became heroes over time. The young man says that the Thunder Emperor was born strong, so he doesn't quite get the logic. The editor places his cup on the table and says that what matters is what's right for this story. He looks the writer in the eye and says it's time for his protagonist to grow too. Our author suggests adding a scene where the protagonist overcomes something, and the editor instantly agrees. However, the man in glasses looks at his watch and realizes it's time to leave. He says goodbye, mentioning another meeting, and the writer thanks him for the great advice. Before leaving, he asks the young man to really reflect on his idea of growth. Then the editor turns and walks away because the protagonist's journey begins now. Alone, Tae-eon reflects on the concept of a growing protagonist. He wonders what that really means as his companions fight bravely. And one of the guild members also questions what exactly growth is. Back in his room, the writer works hard on his manuscript through the night. He seems deep in thought, trying to find a solution to his story's problem. With no ideas, he decides to ask for help on an online forum about how to describe character growth. One user replies that it's simple, just show the hero training or getting new items. But another comment says that's not enough and internal growth is important too. Completely confused, the young man wonders what the hell this so-called internal growth even is. Then the reply says it's about overcoming trauma or inner conflicts, but it's hard to explain. The user continues, giving examples of how a protagonist can push past their limits to help a friend. With his head spinning from all the information, the young man bangs the desk in frustration. He lays down on the keyboard and admits to himself that he has no idea what to do. But a smile appears on his face as he thinks that at least he can watch others grow. Back at the portal, a giant bear-like monster appears in front of his companions. The master shouts for everyone to maintain the battle formation while the group's ace wears a serious expression. With a terrifying roar, the creature raises its enormous claws, ready to strike. The monster then slams the ground with brutal force, shattering everything around it. However, the warrior manages to block the monster's paw with his sword and apologizes. With a confident smile, he says he tends to be a bit rough in battle. Then he calls his battle companions to assist him, and they respond to the call. They strike the creature in a coordinated assault, hitting it from all sides. Our author watches the battle closely while jotting everything down in his notebook. But in his notebook, he only manages to scribble, unable to come up with any useful ideas for his novel. With a frustrated look, he realizes there's nothing helpful there for his story. He remembers that for the past 3 weeks, the battle tactics have been exactly the same. At this rate, he imagines his editor canceling the contract and panics at the thought. After the battle, the giant bear is defeated, and the warrior congratulates everyone on a job well done. He then turns and is surprised to see the newcomer so quiet in his corner and asks what he's doing. Suddenly, the author is on the ground, begging not to have the contract canceled, leaving the man confused. The guild's ace then calls him to get going, drawing Hyung's attention. Yongsik asks him if he hasn't forgotten something, and the other thinks it's about profit sharing. The ace says that's important too, but grabs the protagonist in an arm lock and says it's about something else. Cheerfully, he says they need to celebrate his initiation from 2 weeks ago. With a tired look, the warrior remembers the newcomer's welcome party that still hasn't happened. But the man apologizes and says he has something important to take care of today, leaving the others confused. He then turns and walks away, saying they should save the celebration for another day. Faced with this, another member explains that after all, their companion is the head of a household and has responsibilities. Next, we see Hyung getting on a bus and heading somewhere important in the city. He looks out the window of the vehicle with a gentle smile on his face, appearing calm and at peace. Shortly after, the man appears in a bookstore and then a flower shop, buying a few things. He walks out carrying a gift bag and a beautiful bouquet of blue and white flowers. With a serene, happy look, the warrior seems quite pleased with his day's purchases. Soon after, he walks toward a hospital at night with the gifts in his hands. The scene shifts to inside the hospital, showing a little boy in a hospital bed talking with a woman. The boy and the woman look toward the newcomer, and the boy in bed smiles brightly upon seeing the warrior. Then the little boy calls him Dad, and the man asks his son how he's been doing lately. The boy proudly says he ate all his food, and the father praises him, clearly delighted by the news. Smiling, Hyung says a good boy deserves a reward and hands him a book. The boy is stunned and recognizes the book as a novel by the author Namegeng. At that moment, the father asks if that was the one he wanted, and the son excitedly confirms it was. Grinning from ear to ear, the boy thanks him and says his dad is the best ever. Then the man turns to his wife while the son eagerly prepares to start reading. With care, he gives her the beautiful bouquet of flowers he bought earlier. The woman is surprised and touched by the unexpected gift from her husband. He holds her hand and reminds her that today is their wedding anniversary. Smiling, she says that over time they have both forgotten the special date. They share a loving gaze and affectionately call each other dear with heartful emotion. Then they embrace warmly in a moment full of tenderness and love. Suddenly, the little boy calls his dad and the couple turns to see what's happening. The boy is sitting on the bed, reading the book he just received from his father. But then his nose starts to bleed and he looks forward with a shocked expression. He says he's feeling a bit strange and his parents stare at him horrified. Suddenly, little Jiho collapses with blood running from his nose, and his parents scream his name in desperation. Now, little Jiho is lying in the hospital bed, struggling to breathe through a mask. Fortunately, the medication is working and the situation should stabilize for now. At that moment, the doctor explains to the father that the boy's rare illness worsens with man exposure. He understands the situation is difficult, but the child needs surgery as soon as possible. With a grim expression, the father clenches his hands and says he knows but has few options left. The doctor then says he'll prepare everything and asks to be notified as soon as the father is ready. With fists clenched, the man simply nods without saying a single word. Alone, he wonders if he should take out another loan or accept more mercenary work. The warrior looks into the hospital room and sees his wife crying beside their son. He walks over to comfort her and promises that he'll find a way to get the money. Smiling, he tells her to trust him and that the surgery fees are nothing. That's when Jiho finally wakes up, calling for his dad. His parents shout in surprise and desperation upon seeing him awake and ask if he's okay. With half-open eyes, Jiho weakly calls out for his mom and dad, who look at him worried. Relieved, they ask if he's feeling better and tell him he must have been scared. While Hyun reassures him that the doctor will stop the pain, Jiho apologizes. The little boy laments his condition and the father tells him not to say such things. But the child continues, saying that if he weren't sick, his family wouldn't be suffering so much, and they are shocked by their son's words. With a weak voice, the boy tries to say something to his parents, who watch him closely. His mother holds his hand and asks why he's apologizing. She says that, in truth, they're the ones who should be apologizing to him. The father then promises they'll end his suffering and make him better. Together, they assure the boy that everything will be okay in the end. Sometime later, the warrior is seen in a long line of hunters. His face shows exhaustion, but also strong determination to help. He tries for another loan, but the clerk says he already has too many. With a dark look, he hears that they can't approve one more loan. With no other choice, he thinks that mercenary work is his only option. After another battle, the man sits on a tree stump, completely exhausted. A companion congratulates him on the job, and the warrior simply thanks him. Then the companion asks why he's pushing himself so hard and if he needs money fast. Forcing a smile, the warrior says it's something like that. The other hunter looks surprised and seems a bit skeptical of his story. The warrior apologizes and asks if the colleague could lend him some cash. The man is completely stunned when he hears he needs 200 million. He then notes that all C-rank hunters are in the same boat, and the warrior agrees. His colleague looks thoughtful as he considers his friend's difficult situation. He pulls out his phone and tells the man to wait just a second. Right after, he asks his contact about a job they discussed earlier and if it's available for a C-rank. Over the phone, the mercenary confirms he got the info he needed. The warrior asks if there's a good job available, but the other isn't sure it's a good idea. With a serious look, the man asks what the job is and says he'll do anything. His friend explains that a B-rank mage guild needs a tank for a very dangerous portal. As the sole tank, he would receive 100 million as a reward, which shocks the man. At that moment, the companion warns him it's a risky situation, and he'll have to hold off the monsters alone. Even with the warning that he might die, the warrior says it's fine and accepts the risk. And with all his determination, he asks his friend to introduce him. Inside the portal, he faces a giant monster and tells himself that he has to do this. Then the mages shout for the C-rank to hold the line or they'll all be wiped out. With all his strength, the man yells, "Got it," and faces the creature head-on. The monster then strikes with its giant axe and the warrior braces for impact. He manages to block the blow. The force behind it is absolutely brutal. The creature follows up with another attack, spinning its axe with great power. As he fights, he remembers the time his rent suddenly went up. The landlord told him the rent had increased and that she couldn't make an exception for him. She also said that if he didn't pay by next month, he would have to vacate the place. With those memories, the man feels his legs weaken under the pressure of battle. He also remembers the guild office rent that increased by 200,000 won. With the strain of the fight in his memories, he drops to one knee, trying to endure the blow. He also recalls the doctor saying Jiho urgently needs surgery. Under the crushing pressure, he grits his teeth in pain and effort to keep going. Despite all the hardship, he refuses to fall without a fight. The warrior gathers his strength, plants his feet firmly, and begins to push the monster back. With superhuman effort, he continues fighting for his beloved family. Shouting with determination, he declares that he is the head of that household and won't give up. Despite his resolve, the creature raises its axe for another strike. Then it hits him again with full force, and the man is injured in the process. Lying on the ground, he hears the mages yelling at him to use his mana and push through. Even wounded and down, all he can think about is his son Jiho at that moment. With a vision of his son smiling, he apologizes for being such a pathetic father. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Taeyeon sighs wearily in his room. With an exhausted expression, he reflects on the concept of growth he still doesn't understand. He realizes it's already morning and feels like he's about to collapse from creative fatigue. Suddenly, his phone starts ringing and Sung Bo-hyung's name appears on the screen. Yeon answers and tells Sumno he was just about to head to work. However, he's shocked when his friend apologizes and mentions the name Man Se-shang. At the hospital, the warrior lies unconscious in bed and his wife sobs while holding his hand. Sunggo and the author enter the room, surprising the woman with their visit. That's when Tae-yeon realizes Man Se-seon accepted a dangerous job to pay for his son's surgery. This frustrates the guild's sub-leader, who wonders why his friend didn't ask them for help. Not knowing what to say, the author just stands there with a very nervous look. He then offers to help and asks how much money would be enough for the treatment. This surprises and excites the sub-leader, who calls him the Thunder Emperor. However, he quickly turns serious again, as if thinking about something important. He thanks him for the offer, but refuses the help, leaving Tae-yeon confused by the response. Sumno explains that if the warrior needed money, he would have asked for help long ago. Then he reveals that he brought the author into the guild, hoping his friend's situation would improve. Suddenly, another member runs in and says he contacted the guild Man Se-seon was working with. Faced with this, the sub-leader doesn't know whether to call his friend an honest man or just stubborn. He tells the author that the warrior would be disappointed and that they'll handle this on their own. With that, Sunggo walks away, leaving Tae-yeon behind with a worried look. But then he turns around, confused after hearing the author agree. Our protagonist says he won't help as the Thunder Emperor, but as the youngest member of the guild. Meanwhile, the Mage Guild prepares for battle as monsters begin to approach. A horde of skeletons appears, and a mage yells for the C ranks to hold the front line. Sunggo and his companion rush into battle, ready for action. With a battle cry, he and his colleague take position to face the threat. The skeletons, with glowing red eyes, charge for the hunters. Sunggo and his partner fight bravely against the creatures in an intense battle. A mage complains that they're not even trying and shouts for them to stop the monsters from passing. Even giving it their all, one enemy gets through, and the leader's partner apologizes for the failure. They reach the boss room and decide to take a break and regroup before the fight. Sitting on the floor, the two companions look exhausted and wounded after the battle. In that moment, the sub-leader realizes he's already at his limit and wonders how Se-seon handled all of it alone. A mage complains that they should have hired a B-rank tank for this mission. The others agree that they can barely handle the monsters and will be defeated. The mage explains there's nothing they can do because hiring a B-rank mercenary costs 300 million. Another mage recalls that last time they managed with one C rank, and now they have two, so they should be fine. However, Sungwoo thinks he can't blame them for their anxiety and that they have every right to be concerned. He clenches his fist and wonders if he'll be able to hold out and what he'll do if he and Yeonsik get injured. Just then, Tae-yeon arrives and calls out to Sungho and his companion, who look at him in surprise. He appears with an exhausted, almost skeletal face and a strange smile, leaving both of them confused. They wonder what the hell happened to the rookie and why he looks like that. With a confident look, the author asks if they trust him to lead the attack against the boss. With that, the battle resumes and the mages and tanks fight together against the monsters. The mages find it strange that the boss hasn't shown up and wonder if another hunter took it down before them. In response, the mage leader suggests calling it a day, and one of his companions questions that decision. He explains that there were too many enemies and that he used almost all of his mana during the fight. So the mage doesn't know why the boss didn't appear, but most of the monsters are already defeated. He suggests they rest to recover their mana and then track the boss again. The leader admits that he barely has enough mana left for one or two more spells at most. The mage leader concludes that to hurt the boss, they need to stun it, and C ranks aren't capable of that. So the mage leader announces to everyone that the raid is over for the day. He then congratulates everyone and says they'll come back for the boss another time, which relieves the group. One of the mages praises the leader's decision, who then turns around and Tae-yeon asks if they're already leaving. The leader is confused, but the author says that actually they're just getting started. Soon after, the group leader asks what he's doing as Tae-yeon points forward with a confident smile. Suddenly, a massive sphere of blue energy appears in the middle of the room, stunning everyone. Then the energy surrounds the mages, and while one of them panics, the author remains calm and composed. Next, a giant skeletal foot emerges from the energy and slams into the floor with force. The creature is revealed to be the giant skeleton, a rank B+ boss monster. Completely shocked, the mages scream as they finally see the boss right in front of them. At that moment, the leader complains about the terrible timing and orders everyone to ready their spells for an attack. The mages then launch spells of fire, electricity, and ice at the creature. The spells hit the boss directly, but the monster doesn't seem to feel a thing. Afterward, the giant skeleton remains completely unscathed, and the mages can't believe what they're seeing. The monster stares at the mages, and one of them says he's completely out of mana to fight. Terrified, the mages wonder if this is the end for them. But suddenly, Tae-yeon shouts to his companions that this is their chance to strike. With that, Sungho and his partner ready themselves for battle with determined expressions. Then the two tanks charge at the giant boss in a coordinated assault. The mage leader is stunned and doesn't understand what the two hunters are doing. Sungho's partner leaps and strikes the monster's leg with surprising force. Then Sungho attacks the creature's other leg with a precise hit from his weapon. The mages can't believe that C ranks are overwhelming the boss so easily. Smiling, the author simply observes the scene while the mages continue wondering what is going on. Sungho leaps and strikes the giant skeleton with his chain weapon. Gritting with confidence, he realizes everything is going just as the rookie had planned. Ruining a bit, Tae-yeon shows his notebook to his two companions, who look at it in surprise. Smiling, he says he put together a strategy using association data and did his research. He shows in the notebook that due to its size, the boss's attacks are strong but also very slow. That's why he explains the creature's weak points are the joints where the bones connect. The author says their strength lies in speed, and that he'll give the signal to attack before the monster can move. Shocked, the sub-leader asks if the rookie figured all that out in just one night. With an embarrassed smile, the writer says that after all, he is an author. He explains that research is a basic skill for any writer, even an aspiring one. Back in the fight, Sungho thanks the rookie and prepares for the next step of the strategy. Shortly after, Tae Aehan explains that the boss has a habit of letting out a loud roar before attacking. That way, the strategy is to keep dodging by moving side to side to split the enemy's attention. The plan is to aim at the giant skeleton's joints at the exact moment it attacks. With a powerful shout, Yongsik prepares his super ultra mega thunder lightning attack. He then hits the creature, which becomes confused by the strike. At that moment, the monster is immobilized by the shock, and the author's plan unfolds perfectly. The writer yells for Sungho to attack now that the enemy is vulnerable. The guild's sub-leader leaps into the air, ready to deliver the final blow to the skeleton. He remembers the rookie's instruction to aim at the boss's core with full power. Shouting fiercely, Sungho uses his strongest ability, the X-Slash. His attack hits the giant skeleton's glowing blue core dead on. The strike seems successful, and the leader watches to see the result. But to everyone's surprise, the blow didn't have the effect they were expecting. Stunned, Tae Aehan realizes the powerful strike simply bounced off the core. Right after, the creature remains unharmed, and the writer finally understands what's going on. The boss takes the opportunity to strike at Sungho, who is vulnerable in midair. He realizes that a strategy is only a method, and without power, they can't win. In despair, one of the mages shouts that it's over because his C rank can't defeat the boss. Tae Aehan then decides that he has no other choice but to join the fight. Moments before impact, Sungho desperately calls out to his partner Yongsik in the air. He tells him to remember their usual tactic, and that they'll try a slight variation. Hearing this, Tae Aehan becomes curious and wonders what kind of plan they always use. He recalls the tactic the guild practiced many times in previous battles. Sungho shouts that even without Sesong, they'll combine their strength and fight for him. Yongsik agrees and says, as always, he'll draw the monster's attention first. Then he runs and starts taunting the giant skeleton, calling it a bonehead. With his secret technique, the hunter provokes the creature to make it furious. The strategy works, and the boss clearly becomes very enraged by the boy's taunts. The skeleton then leaps toward Yongsik, who runs and yells to Sungho that it's his turn now. Sungho seizes the chance and throws his chain, wrapping it around the monster's leg. He manages to immobilize the creature and shouts that the plan is working. The monster stumbles and begins to fall, and Sungho prepares for his final move. Right then, he remembers Sesong's finishing blow and gets ready to use it. In midair, Sungho confirms the plan as the giant skeleton remains trapped below them. Sungho thinks that Sesong would have destroyed the core, but now they'll do it together. Yongsik positions himself on the ground, ready to execute the combined attack with his leader. He prepares to use his powerful move, the Super Ultra Mega Thunder Lightning X. The two attack simultaneously, aiming directly at the boss's core with everything they've got. The double strike finally works, and the giant skeleton's core begins to crack. The blue core then explodes in a burst of light, destroying the monster's vital point. With its core shattered, the giant skeleton's body begins to slowly disintegrate. The enormous creature finally collapses to the ground, defeated before all the hunter's eyes. Soon after, the mages watch as the boss vanishes and realize this means they've won. Relieved and joyful, they celebrate, shouting that they survived the battle. Tae Aehan watches everything from a distance, completely stunned by what he just witnessed. He realizes that even in a desperate situation, the two companions didn't give up. Then the writer understands they created a brand new strategy on their own to win. With a slight smile on his lips, the author finally seems to grasp something important. Watching the two friends, he understands that this is exactly what growth is. Sometime later, we see a large hospital on a sunny, peaceful day. In one of the rooms, the unconscious warrior murmurs his son Jiho's name. With an expression of pain, he apologizes and says that his father is so sorry for everything. Then the man thinks he was too useless to protect his little boy. Suddenly, he wakes up in a panic and sits up in bed, completely disoriented. He then remembers the battle and how he was trying to earn money for the surgery. With a hand to his head, the man desperately wonders if he ended up failing. Calling himself a pathetic fool, he questions what he's supposed to do next. At that moment, his friends enter the room and are happy to see that he's awake. Sungho scolds him and asks if he has any idea how worried they were. With his head down, the warrior tries to apologize but is interrupted by his friends. They tell him to rest and say they worked hard while he was out. Sungho tells him he no longer needs to worry about Jiho's surgery. Shocked, the father can only ask what they mean by that. Then the sick father is stunned and asks if that money is what they earn as mercenaries. His friends give a proud smile, and Yongsik laughs with satisfaction at his reaction. The group leader confirms that the amount is enough to cover his son's surgery. Even so, the man in the hospital bed refuses the help, saying he can't accept it. Everyone is left speechless, not understanding the reason for his sudden refusal. Sungho gets angry and asks if he's lost his mind and forgotten about his sick son. Faced with this, the warrior explains that he can't take something they risked so much to earn. Yongsik tells him to stop being ridiculous and just accept it because they all know the situation. With a serious look, the hunter replies that this is exactly the problem he's facing. He then admits that everything happened because of his own weakness. In memory, we see an exhausted team outside, and one of them complains about being tired. A friend says it's normal since they went through 3 or 4 portals in a single day. Another hunter worries that at this rate, they'll collapse before even helping Jiho. Unexpectedly, the guild's vice leader shows up and surprises the tired team members. He complains that with that kind of performance, their guild will never reach B rank. One member complains that they're burning themselves out just trying to keep up with the leader, saying that one by one, everyone is getting worn out and injured, ending up in the hospital. With a sly smile, the vice leader reveals that he's planning to start his own guild. The team leader hears the conversation from afar and feels guilty for everything that's happening. He regrets the lost dreams of his companions while staring at an old photo of them all together. And also for the families he couldn't protect, including his own with his little son. Back in the hospital room, the sick man blames himself for placing such a heavy burden on his friends. But they deny it and say the real blame lies with that traitor, vice leader Richard. Then the group's writer steps forward and firmly declares that he will continue helping. At that moment, the warrior is confused, so the young man explains that he received criticism about his book. At first, he didn't understand it since his protagonist was getting stronger and learning new skills. But he realized through them that real growth isn't just about that. He says they didn't charge into portals just to level up like his fictional character. In reality, they showed incredible courage to help their guild leader. Finally, the writer smiles and says he'll stick around to witness the growth of his hero. He finishes by saying that his help is also for the good of the guild. With that, the sick leader understands that it's not about him, it's about helping one another. He then admits that he was just too afraid of getting hurt again, like a fool. That's when the man realizes that because of this fear, he was only thinking about himself. He turns to his companions and says that from this moment on, he asks with a smile if he can be a little selfish too and accept their help. At this, his friends laugh and tell him to be as selfish as he wants without worry. Emotional, the leader wipes away a tear as the writer cheers for his decision. Then the young author gives a creepy smile and says he can finally help as much as he wants. At that moment, the patient in the bed gets scared by the reaction and asks why he sounds so sinister. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a city in flames with explosions happening everywhere. There we see several hunters in white armor fighting against mysterious creatures. An older man with white hair leads the team and orders them to hold formation. The warriors obey and begin fighting a massive winged monster in the street. The shadowy creature attacks with unbelievable speed and defeats several heroes at once. The demonic creature then prepares a fireball, and the leader watches the threat carefully. But then an S-rank hunter with a massive shield appears and blocks the beast's attack. The explosion pushes him back, but he manages to protect the older warrior from the impact. With his shield in hand, the burly Zheng Hongche asks if the elder is alright. Shortly after, the leader confirms that everything is fine, and the two face the enemy together in battle. They both observe the fallen soldiers and realize that even elite troops are retreating. After all, a monster is always a monster, and that demon boss Diablo is rankast S. Seeing the situation, the elder asks someone named Hyujun to take care of the guild members. Hyujun, the white cloak of rank S, heals the wounded and tells the leader not to worry. Wielding his spear, the elder says he may have to risk his own life. The winged creature prepares another large fireball to strike the hunters. Faced with that, the two opponents stare each other down, ready for the final showdown in the middle of the destroyed city. Suddenly, a massive portal opens in the sky and something begins to descend slowly from it. Soon after, a massive lightning strike known as the Wheel of Thunder crashes to the ground. The leader shields his face with his arm as the wind from the impact blows in his direction. In that moment, he smiles in satisfaction and remarks that living a long time really has its advantages. He never imagined he'd witness a day like that, but he always believed in his grandson's potential. With a confident smile, the grandfather asks if the Thunder Emperor has come to save him. But the young blonde flatly denies it and says he actually came to ask for a favor. The elder then gets irritated with his grandson's attitude and calls him a cheeky brat. At that moment, the scene shifts to a crowd of fans and reporters screaming for an idol named Kazuya. We then see the famous blonde young man walking through an airport with his travel suitcase. While removing his sunglasses, he comments that it's been a while since he came to Korea. He then wonders how a certain someone is doing, and his name is revealed to be Sato Kazuya. In an office, a man in a suit is surprised and comments that he didn't expect such a sudden visit. Kazuya apologizes with a smile as he calmly drinks a cup of tea in the room. Faced with that, the blonde hands over an envelope and says the president of the Japanese Association has something urgent for him. Reading the contents, the man wonders what could be so important to involve one of the 12 apostles. With a shocked expression, he discovers that two powerful hunters named Destroyer and Jaina have died. The blonde man then confirms the news and says that 2 of the 13 celestial stars were sacrificed. The older man can't believe it and says that such a thing is simply impossible. It is then explained that the 13 celestial stars are the strongest players in the entire world. Excluding the 12 apostles, they are the hunters closest to reaching legendary status. With a serious look, the man wonders who the hell could have taken down those two. At that moment, Kazuya reveals the name of the culprit and says it was the Black Spear. The blonde-haired man then comments on recent events and the global social and economic unrest. Thus, a man with glasses confirms that they were behind all these recent developments. It is revealed that the Black Spear is an extremist group that sees itself as the true elite of humanity. Kazuya then says that this incident proves they are much more than just a terrorist organization. Then, extending his hand to the man, he says that's why his president asked him to deliver the message. The blonde says his boss hopes the two countries will join forces on this matter and that the man should not hesitate. With a firm handshake, the Korean representative replies that of course they will unite. At that moment, the two agree that joining forces is the only way forward, and the blonde thanks him for the cooperation. Faced with that, the blonde man then comments that his association's president is quite the odd guy. He says he could easily deal with it alone and doesn't understand his leader's concern. With a confident smile, the young man asks the other if he doesn't agree with that. Thus, the Korean representative thinks that only 12 people in the world could say something like that so casually. Kazuya wonders if he should go meet that guy now that the alliance has been formed. Elsewhere, we see the guild gathered around a table full of food to celebrate. The red-haired man raises his mug and asks everyone to fill their cups for a toast. Yongsik then declares that first they'll toast to the official entry of the newest member. He shouts excitedly that our author has finally completed his training and returned, and also to wish peace and safety to Brother Seison and little Gio, who are together. Everyone cheers excitedly with their mugs, and the team leader shouts that the party can begin. The red-haired guy devours the food with his cheeks full and yells that it's delicious. Little Gio gets curious and says he wants to try it too, but his mother offers him something else. Meanwhile, Sungbo watches his gluttonous friend at the table with an annoyed expression. He then grabs the greedy one from behind and tells him to eat more slowly before he chokes. Because of that, the two end up wrestling on the floor while the writer eats calmly, unfazed. The guild leader's family enjoys the scene and laughs a lot at their antics. After a while, everyone finishes the meal and someone comments on how full they are. Yongsik shows his bloated belly and says they still need to eat ice cream for dessert. He says dessert is essential and runs off to buy it while Sungbo decides to go with him. Then the wife says goodbye and tells Gio to remember to take his medicine, but the boy complains a little. The writer helps the leader clean the table and asks him to put all the trash into a bag. While they clean, the sick man says he was really surprised the day before, and the friend asks why. He then says he heard the story about Mr. Do Wang's grandson and didn't know he was his grandfather. The young man denies it and says they're not related, that it's just a figure of speech. Then the leader reveals that something else surprised him, being moved to a VIP room. He's shocked because not only will they cover his expenses, but they'll also reimburse what he already paid. On top of all the financial help, old Do Wang even offered a new house for his family. The writer then asks if he didn't say helping the guild grow was the best way to repay them. With a thumbs up, the leader says that after the surgery, they'll start recruiting new members for the team. Right after, a young author gets excited about the idea and agrees to give his best to help. While cleaning the table, he wonders what kind of episode will unfold when recruiting new teammates. Suddenly, a dark energy spreads across the hospital room floor and quickly catches his attention. The young man senses a strange presence and his face turns serious with the looming threat. At that moment, the leader returns and asks what happened, but the young man says he needs to step out for a bit. He then jumps out the hospital window surrounded by lightning and shouts that he'll be back soon. Tae-ayan lands in a forest enveloped in his energy. He looks around and wonders if the enemy suppressed their energy to hide. He focuses and realizes that the presence that just appeared is extremely powerful. With a focused look, he gets ready because he knows a battle is about to begin. He then takes a fighting stance and prepares to attack with a powerful kick. His powerful kick creates a massive shockwave that destroys the surrounding forest trees. Our boy then senses something pass behind him, ready to strike. Then a huge explosive impact occurs there, destroying that area. The impact was caused by him blocking a punch, and he asks what the hell that was. The person who attacked him compliments his skills and says they thought he'd be rusty. It was Kazuya, and smoke was coming from his fist due to the power of his punch. With a friendly look, he calmly asks the young author how he's been lately. The blonde guy asks if Tae-ayan had returned to work to write a realistic story, and he confirms. Then Kazuya says he couldn't help but be interested in the hero's return after his sudden disappearance. But then he admits he was actually a bit surprised by his comeback, leaving the young man confused. In a flashback, he recalls the writer used to be a discouraged guy who got annoyed at everything easily. Scratching his head, the guy with glasses confirms that a lot of twists happen in his life. But he says with a smile that it's still fun, and now he wants to write even better. Kazuya stares at the writer for a moment and realizes something about him seems to have changed. He then wishes him good luck with his writing and tells the young man not to give up before leaving. Then the blonde explains that he was working nearby and just stopped by to see how he was doing. With a smile, he says that since he's the Thunder Emperor, the two of them will meet again soon. The author is left alone, thoughtful on the tree trunk, not quite understanding what just happened. The scene shifts to an office where the representative of the Korean Association observes the city. He thinks it's unbelievable that 2 of the 13 celestial stars have been eliminated, and that now the only ones who can stop the extremist organization are the 12 apostles. He then recalls the conversation with the writer, who believes the Black Spear seems like a threat, but Kazuya alone might be enough to handle it. The association president wonders if the Thunder Emperor will act and already fears the worst. Another memory comes to mind of the author saying he finished analyzing the data and planned to retire again, leaving the man in despair. The head of the association falls to his knees and screams in desperation, begging the young man not to retire again. An assistant outside hears the shouting and thinks he definitely doesn't want to go into that room. At that moment, the employee enters and asks if the boss has calmed down, and he awkwardly says it was just a vocal exercise. Then the assistant hands him a report and says a hunter from their country ranked first. The chief asks if it's the demon's sword, and the young man confirms, asking if he already knew. The man in the suit confirms that he did and says he's the best among all the new talents he knows. The hunter in question is the demon sword Che Sanwoo, a genius who reached S-class in record time. He is contracted with the Black Moon, one of the 7 mythical weapons and considered the strongest of them all. This weapon has existed since the era of the Great Gate and is extremely powerful and coveted by many. Shortly after, the man with glasses thinks that only 2 masters who contracted the Black Moon ever reached legendary rank. He gets excited and thinks that if the demon sword reaches legendary rank, something incredible will happen. With a shout of joy, he imagines that Korea will have 2 legendary hunters within its borders, and that would make Korea the #1 nation in the world, and him the greatest association president of all. He even shouts that he won't have to rely on the Thunder Emperor anymore or put up with his whims. He keeps complaining that the guy retires on a whim, but the author interrupts him. The man freezes in fear when he realizes who had been listening the whole time. Then with a sinister smile, the author tells him to keep talking. He's very curious now. Panicked, the president tries to explain himself, but the writer says he understands. With that, the scene changes to outside the association building. The demon sword was talking from his master's back, who tells him that as an S-class, he should register to receive various benefits. In response, the sword speaks to him and advises him to become a warrior worthy of its power. The weapon continues, saying that once he unleashes its full power, no one will be able to defeat him. The hooded young man looks determined, as this is the revenge he desperately seeks. Meanwhile, the head of the association tries to apologize to the protagonist as they exit the building. They pass by the demon's sword, and the president looks completely panicked. Suddenly, the sword of the hooded youth begins to glow with an intense, strong red light. Soon after, the weapon's gem reflects the author, and it wonders how a being like that could even exist. The young swordsman becomes confused by his weapon's reaction and asks what the hell just happened. In response, the sword comments on the man who just passed, leaving the hooded youth deep in thought. It continues speaking and says that the guy in front of them is something dangerous. It reveals that he is a monster, and that the swordsman should never fight against a creature like that. The hooded man hesitates and thinks that the author doesn't seem like anything special to him. He watches the scene and says he can't sense anything unusual coming from the young writer, but he finds it strange because his mythical weapon has never spoken like that before. Thinking that if the guy really is a monster, a fight might be interesting, he begins to walk. The sword picks up on his intent and asks in alarm if he's really going to do as she thinks. At that moment, the hooded man believes that a fight with the author will definitely help him grow. He grips his weapon, which pleads with him to calm down, that this is absolutely not a good idea. Ignoring the warning, the swordsman approaches from behind, pointing his sword at the writer. With a defiant look, the hooded young man then invites him to a little battle. The writer brushes the weapon aside with his hand and simply asks why he should fight. The swordsman is shocked, wondering how the young man pushed away the black moon like that. He knew that touching the weapon would cause anyone to fall under its spell, and he smiles, seeing that this guy is different. The author refuses and asks who he thinks he is to show up out of nowhere asking for a fight. Mentally, the hooded one wonders if the other just doesn't deal with people below his level. With a smile, the swordsman takes off his hood and apologizes, saying he forgot his manners. He then introduces himself as Cha Sangwoo, the demon's sword, and says the writer must have heard of him. But the author doesn't care and says he's busy, leaving the other young man confused by the response. With that, the head of the association is stunned when he realizes who the Thunder Emperor's challenger is. He mentally asks himself if this is really about leveling up, then answers himself that yes, it is, while the swordsman keeps arguing with the writer in the background. He goes on to explain that fighting a strong opponent is a way to evolve, but the writer looks uninterested. With an evil grin, the president thinks that the demon's sword might achieve massive growth from a short experience. Soon after, the writer tries to leave, but the president grabs him by the shoulder and asks him to wait. Smiling, he says the writer still has one request left to use this month. So our protagonist looks back and asks what the hell that has to do with anything. The president says that's why the writer even came to the association, and the young man thinks he's scary. At that moment, the president says that since he acted poorly, he'll make a request and hopes the writer agrees, and the author asks what it is. Then the president points to the swordsman and asks our hero to have a match with him. He takes them to the best training facility the association proudly owns. The man in the suit explains that to prevent impact leakage, dozens of barriers have been set up. He guarantees that not even a high-ranking individual could break the barrier, and the swordsman realizes he's the president. The author refuses, but the boss insists, and the swordsman wonders why someone like that is trying to please the other guy. The swordsman then wonders about the author's identity while the president sends them to the training grounds. Demon Blade walks toward the training arena looking confident and ready. Both of them face off in the training zone, and the swordsman tells himself he'll soon find out who this person is. The president watches from a distance and asks both fighters to get ready for battle. Then the man in the suit shouts for them to begin, and the swordsman charges toward our hero. He attacks, thinking someone like the author is just a training partner to help him grow stronger. But the young swordsman is completely shocked when the other guy simply dodges his strike. He tries to attack again, but our protagonist evades with ease. The swordsman yells and attacks again. The writer keeps dodging effortlessly. The hooded young man is stunned and can't believe how simply he dodged that attack. He decides to go all out, and the sword tells him it warned him. The opponent is a true monster. With that, the black moon begins to glow, and the weapon's gem initiates the synchronization process. As the sync level rises, the swordsman attacks with faster and more powerful strikes. The percentage keeps increasing, and the mythical weapon's power becomes even more intense in the arena. The author notices the strikes are getting much faster and looks slightly surprised by the change. At 54%, the young man's arm is covered with dark markings. He unleashes a barrage of attacks, but our hero continues to dodge every single one. From above, the president is impressed and thinks this magical power is beyond expectations. He exclaims that this is the true power of the famous demon sword. Soon after, the swordsman warns that from this point on, the fight will be very different. Then the man in the suit thinks that maybe even the Thunder Emperor himself wouldn't be able to relax during this battle. A fast red slash flies toward our glasses-wearing protagonist, trimming a bit of his hair. His hair was the only thing hit by the attack, as once again he dodged it in Matrix style. He realizes the strikes are getting much heavier, and the fight is getting serious. The young swordsman stomps hard on the ground. He begins the sequence of attacks that Tae-Yen manages to dodge effortlessly. The demon sword can't believe what's happening, as none of his strikes land. And indeed, none of the blows seem to have any effect on the young writer. Panting and tired, the swordsman pauses for a moment to catch his breath. He wonders if the difference in power between them is really that great. The author adjusts his glasses and with a smile, asks if he's finally going to give up. He commands the black moon to increase the synchronization, and it warns him that he's already at his limit. The cunning young man replies that he knows, but now is the time to go beyond that limit. With an intense red glow, the mythical weapon agrees to raise the synchronization power. but it warns him that if he loses consciousness, his soul will be consumed by its power. The synchronization rises to 58%, and the swordsman's eye glows intensely. With a furious shout, the young man transforms and his power explodes with terrifying force. The arena is filled with overwhelming red energy pouring out from the swordsman's body. He unleashes his Black Moon technique, creating a massive vortex of power within the arena. The association president is stunned and says the power he's witnessing is incredible. With an evil grin, the hooded young man warns that this time the author won't escape. Immediately after, the red energy charges forward like a tornado toward our glasses-wearing protagonist. The gem of the mythical sword glows intensely, unleashing all of its hidden power. A devastating attack is launched at the writer with full force. The author is impressed by the display and thinks his opponent is very good. He decides it's time to show a bit of his power, and lightning begins to spark. The swordsman notices the electricity and wonders what that thunder power is. Our protagonist then concentrates a small spark of lightning on the tip of his finger. In the blink of an eye, a lightning explosion is released that collides with the incoming attack. The yellow electricity completely overwhelms the demon sword's red energy. A lightning explosion lights up the entire arena with a powerful, intense glow. The president covers his eyes from the force of the blast, grunting. He lowers his arm and realizes that all the barriers have been shattered by the impact of the fight. The training arena is left in ruins, and the demon sword is kneeling on the ground defeated. Panting and exhausted, the hooded young man lets out a weak laugh despite everything. Our protagonist slowly approaches his opponent, who is still chuckling on the ground. The young swordsman looks at him and finally says he didn't know he was the Thunder Emperor. With a determined look, the swordsman then asks to be accepted as the author's disciple. But our protagonist, busy typing on his laptop, simply replies that he's not interested. This leaves the swordsman silent, staring at him. He insists and begs, saying he has a very important reason to become stronger. The author then begins telling the young man's life story. He says that the young man's younger brother had potential but was kidnapped by an organization. To save him, the swordsman made a contract with the Black Moon, which appeared out of nowhere. After many struggles, he finally rescued his relative from the clutches of evil. However, since that incident, the boy has been in a coma in a hospital, as if his soul had vanished. That's why the young man swore vengeance against those responsible and is seeking a way to heal his brother. The writer finishes the story, and the hooded youth asks in shock how he knows all those details. The protagonist replies that he heard a week ago, and that the young man is already strong enough to fight. He adds that with a few more years of experience, the swordsman could become even stronger. Angrily, the young man slams his hand on the table, showing all his frustration with the situation. He shouts that if it takes that long, it will be too late for his brother. In response, the swordsman says that even being rank as within 2 years, he needs a master to go further. He says that during the fight, he felt that no one in the world is stronger than the author. Desperate, the young man says his brother is in the hospital and that he can only count on the Thunder Emperor. The writer replies that it's a sad situation, but he's too busy with his main job. This confuses the hooded young man, and the author reveals that being a hunter is just a side gig for him. With a smile, our protagonist says that his real job is being a web novel writer. Faced with that, the demon sword is completely speechless at the young man's unexpected revelation. The writer then walks away, leaving the other young man completely confused on the street. The hooded youth watches him from a distance and thinks he really can't make sense of the situation. He wonders why someone with so much power and reputation would choose to focus on being a writer. And even seeing his desperation, the author doesn't seem to care at all about his request. But the Black Moon says it understands, and the young man asks how that could be possible. The weapon explains that it's like the writer is running a race alone, way ahead. There's no one he can catch up to because he's already far beyond everyone else. And there's no one chasing him, since the difference in power is just too great. So the weapon continues and says that if he keeps running alone on this path and looks around, he'll realize that there's absolutely no one at his side in that endless race. Because of that, he'll feel lonely and empty, completely alone at the top. The swordsman then asks if it's the loneliness of the strongest, and the weapon says that's just a guess. She explains that former wielders lost their purpose because they were simply too powerful, and then the author calls out to him. The writer asks if the hooded guy is going to follow him home, which leaves the other confused. Then our hero points to a building and reveals that it's his family's home. The hooded young man refuses and says he'd never be shameless enough to follow him there. But his stomach growls, and the author realizes the other guy is hungry. He invites the young man to get something to eat before heading off. Moments later, the young man thanks him for the meal at a table full of delicious food. The writer then asks about a girl named Gorilla and thinks he almost showed something inappropriate. At that moment, his mother scolds him for calling his sister that, but he insists he's just telling the truth. The father of the family simply laughs when his son gets smacked by his mother. Our boy complains about the pain while the swordsman sits pale, staring at his food. He remembers without shame that he followed the author all the way to his house. The father tells the demon sword not to worry and to make himself at home. Then he asks if the young man is close to his son, since he's the first friend he's ever brought over. The author denies it and says he's just someone he ran into, but his brother teases him over the introduction. The father then asks if the younger boy knows him, and he replies that the swordsman is pretty famous. The writer's mother places a fried egg into the guest's rice bowl. The young man thanks her, and she says that any friend of her son is like a son to her. With a smile, the lady tells him to come back anytime he's hungry or needs something. The swordsman feels awkward and just nods, unsure of what to say. He thanks her for the food and gets ready to eat the egg she placed in his bowl. The author then complains and asks his mom where his egg is, but she tells him to behave himself. Sangwoo then has a brief memory of his own family, in a moment similar to this one. As he continues eating, he thinks it's been a very long time since he had a homemade meal. With a smile on his face, he thinks the food the lady prepared is delicious. At that moment, the whole family stops eating and goes silent, staring at the guest in surprise. He's confused by the silence, not realizing he was crying because of the meal. When he notices, he wipes his eyes and apologizes, and the author says the food was spicy. He dramatically fans his tongue, and his brother agrees, saying it was making him cry too. The father joins in, saying the food was also making him cry, and the mother apologizes to the swordsman. She gets up to grab some water for him, and the author takes the opportunity to ask for some as well. Later, outside, the swordsman thanks him for the evening, but the writer says it wasn't necessary. Still, the young man insists and says it's been a long time since he felt the warmth of a family. He keeps talking, and it seems the memories from that night left him deeply emotional. The author then remembers what the sword said and wonders why the young man suddenly became so talkative. Shortly after, the demon sword apologizes and says he got lost in his own thoughts. With that, he says goodbye and starts walking away from our glasses-wearing protagonist. Alone, the writer wonders if he was too harsh on the other young man during their conversation. But he shrugs off the thought and says he already has enough problems to worry about. He makes a phone call while the hooded young man walks away. The weapon asks if he gave up, but the young man says he can't force the situation any longer. At that moment, the swordsman hears the writer talking about recruiting members for a guild and pays close attention. The man with glasses says on the phone that this is the new beginning of Gawa Mansong, while the other young man watches him. As the author continues his conversation, the swordsman sees an opportunity. With a smile, he thinks that maybe it's still too soon to give up on his goal. The next day, interviews for the guild begin and the first candidates arrive. The two interviewers then ask the first applicant to begin his introduction. Striking a strange pose, a man in a suit shouts that he's Flash Choi Hoon and that he's as fast as light. The long-haired man laughs at the confidence and the applicant thanks him. Then his partner looks at the resume and sees that, aside from his speed, it's also his main specialty. With a disappointed expression, the interviewer says the man has been rejected. Immediately after, the next candidate with an evil grin says he sealed a black dragon in his left arm. He continues explaining that if the seal breaks, it could unleash an incredibly powerful flame. Suddenly, his own hair catches fire, and the interviewers ask someone to escort him out. A young man who looks like he came from another anime claims he could become an S-rank hero if chosen. Other bizarre candidates are rejected one after the other without a single chance of getting in. The two young men grow exhausted and complain that not many decent candidates showed up on the first day. Sitting on the couch, one of them asks about the author, since they haven't heard from him. Turns out the writer stayed up all night working and is now sleeping deeply. Shortly after, the other young man picks up the resume of the next candidate and is shocked by what he sees. The two men are completely stunned by the information on the document in front of them. At that exact moment, Young-sik announces that the next candidate is entering. They look at the paper and discover that the man is a B-rank hunter. He walks in with a giant hammer on his shoulder, approaching the two. With a confident smile, the big guy introduces himself as Nam Dupal to the pair. One of the interviewers asks why a B-rank is there, and the man says he'll be direct. With a greedy look, a hunter asks how much they'll pay him to join the guild. The two interviewers glance at each other and talk about the candidate's unexpected proposal. As it turns out, a guild's rank is determined by the member with the highest level inside it. Because of that, guilds often pay fortunes to strong hunters to serve as a public front. The man says the opportunity is rare and they need to act fast and bring him the money. In response, the interviewer says it's good that he's being direct and immediately rejects him. The hunter is shocked by the answer and asks what he meant by that comment. Mansong isn't shaken by the big guy's serious face, even as he says it doesn't make any sense. He points to the exit and politely asks the large man to leave. Furious, the muscular man slams his hammer on the ground, destroying the room's coffee table. Enraged, the ball hunter yells, asking how they dare be so arrogant with him. He then threatens the two young men with a furious glare. In the background, the red-haired guy grows irritated by the candidate's behavior and insults him from afar. A hooded youth behind him asks if the bald guy was disqualified, and the redhead confirms it. Then Young-sik is surprised when he realizes who the hooded young man is. Meanwhile, one of the interviewers stands up and says he'll explain things simply. He stares at the strong man and says the guild doesn't need him, so he can leave now. Out of control, the hunter raises his hammer to strike the young man without hesitation. But before the blow lands, a hand grabs the weapon. The bald man is confused and looks at his hammer, frozen in the air in disbelief. Behind him stands the hooded youth, holding the head of the hammer in place. The hooded man asks why the guy won't just leave in peace, since he's already been disqualified from the selection. With a serious look, the young man reveals his identity as the famous demon sword. The two young men are shocked and wonder why the swordsman is at the interview. Then the demon sword awkwardly removes his hood and begins talking to the two. Sitting on the couch, he says he came to apply for a position in the guild. Faced with that, the interviewer summarizes the young man's story and asks if he wants to join to become stronger. The hooded youth confirms and says he doesn't have much time because his brother is still in the hospital. His partner whispers that they should reject him. If he joins, the guild will automatically become S-rank. He adds that having such a strong member would bring a lot of trouble and incidents for them. However, the swordsman pleads with a desperate look in his eyes, saying he really needs to grow stronger. The interviewer then remembers his own difficult past and how he too once begged for a chance. He recalls shouting that he was the head of the family and needed to support his relatives. Thinking he can't let someone young go through the same hardship, he makes his decision. With a determined look, he announces that the hooded young man has passed the test. His partner yells and asks if he's lost his mind, but the other reminds him that it was his idea to begin with. The second man tries to explain himself but gets cut off before he can finish his sentence. The interviewer reaches out his hand and says he'll call them by name and looks forward to working together. With a handshake, they finally seal a deal and the swordsman joins the guild. The demon sword also says he's looking forward to working with everyone. The interviewer reveals he has a sick son and understands the hooded young man's desperation. At that moment, the author arrives running and apologizes for being extremely late to the interview. With a desperate look, he asks if the recruitment for new members is already over. The older man informs him that he's no longer the youngest. There's a new member now. The writer is confused and asks who the new youngest member of the guild is. Then the demon sword introduces himself and says he hopes to work well with everyone. Immediately, the glasses-wearing protagonist is left completely speechless by the revelation. With a surprised shout, he asks why Seongwoo was there. That day, the guild's rank rose to S, and it was no longer just a disorganized group. It was now an elite team working alongside their emperor, and the young man was excited. At that moment, the new elite team begins training in a forest with sword combat practice. The former interviewer is also in the middle of the session, blocking a strike with his blade. Suddenly, we see their target, a small pink rabbit, running swiftly through the woods. One of the members yells to the new guy that the creature is heading his way. The little animal makes a face of total panic upon realizing it's cornered by the swordsman, but he does nothing to the rabbit, just staring at it. He then questions what he's seeing and wonders if this childish game is really their combat training. He recalls hearing they defeated a B-rank boss and wonders why the Thunder Emperor is in a place like that. Back at guild headquarters, the writer repeats Seongwoo's question about being in the guild. The swordsman confirms and asks why he chose such a weak guild, but the author's response is vague. The new member gets irritated at the lack of a proper answer from his new teammate, but then the writer's phone vibrates. At that moment, the author receives an urgent message about an SS-rank portal in Brazil. He stands up and says that if the other is curious, he should see it with his own eyes. He hands over a notepad and pen to his new teammate, and asks the swordsman to help with data research and guild tasks. Back in the forest, the red-haired young man ends up breaking his sword. His gaze darkens as he looks at what remains of the weapon in his hand. On his knees, the man cries out his sword's name, mourning its loss. Other members approach to help while the swordsman watches from a distance. Notebook in hand, he thinks it was a mistake to expect anything from that group. He walks over to the older member near the river and asks if they have a moment. Then he suggests that they should all invest in some upgrades together. They arrive at a huge and luxurious place that looks like a massive mall for hunters. This impresses the team, who are amazed by the size of the place and everything available for sale. Suddenly, the redhead excitedly points to a golden statue of the Thunder Emperor. With a flushed face, he says that his biggest dream was to meet the famous hunter in person. The swordsman realizes the guy doesn't know the truth, and his friend comments that he's a bit slow. Then the ex-interviewer thanks the author for a bonus the guild received from the government. His reaction is shown when he sees that the amount is 10 billion won. The hooded guy tells them to consider it as payment for accepting him. Hearing that, the redhead says that the reason doesn't matter. What counts is being next to his idol. With a smile, the swordsman then suggests they finally take a look at the store's weapons. While admiring his sword, Yongsik says he heard it calling to him and that it would be his ego weapon. The long-haired guy picks up a giant sword and thinks about changing his fighting style. Meanwhile, the ex-interviewer grabs an axe and asks if that one is the cheapest. With their new weapons in hand, the trio gathers and tells the swordsman they'll pay for the purchases. But he gets irritated, puts his hand on his face, and asks them to return everything. Confused, the three shout and ask why, while the new member doesn't even know where to start. He explains to the redhead that a sword like that wouldn't be in a department store, but the guy insists he heard it calling him. Then he says the redhead's strength lies in mobility, and that heavy weapon would only slow him down. Right after, the new member asks the guild master if he wants to become a lumberjack with that axe. The guys say they like the weapons and that spending more won't make them stronger. With a sharp look, Seongwoo says that with that mindset, they'll never rank up. At that moment, the long-haired man says he can't speak for the others, but he thought carefully about his decision. He recalls a fight against a boss where they almost lost due to lacking a strong finishing move. Still, the long-haired guy explains that he chose the weapon to compensate for his lack of power. The swordsman hears the reasoning and starts questioning his new teammate. He asks how they managed to be a B-rank boss with those skills. The redhead gets furious at the provocation and says they're way stronger than they seem, but the other admits it was hard to believe a C-rank team defeated such a strong enemy. Yongsik then reveals that it would have been impossible without the author's huge help in that fight, which surprises the hooded man. With a clenched fist, he gets angry remembering how things really went down. He thinks the team is bragging about a victory that actually belonged to the Thunder Emperor, and concludes they're just a bunch of freeloaders riding on the writer's fame. He mentally asks the author why he joined pathetic people like them. Tired of the argument, the new member says he'll choose the right weapons for each of them. The trio is confused by the sudden decision and wonders if they did something wrong. At that moment, a large man with a mustache walks toward the group of hunters. The guys comment that the swordsman looked angry and was belittling them. Then the stranger arrives and says there's been a misunderstanding, but the team has no idea who he is. The mustache man then insults them, asking what a bunch of beggars is doing there. The team is shocked and recognizes the man as the famous hunter Richard Bear. He tells the group to leave because people like them shouldn't be in that place. Yongsik then says to Richard that it's been a long time. The big man then talks to the redhead and asks how he's been all this time. With a fake smile, he compliments him, saying that he once thought he was the coolest guy ever. But with a look of disdain, the red-haired guy says things have changed. He stares at the man filled with anger, asks how he became such a hopeless piece of trash. Then the redhead's teammate says he heard that the big guy abandoned his guild to save himself. He seriously asked Bear if he still calls himself a guild leader. Out of control, the mustache man tries to punch the redhead. But before the blow can land, a hand effortlessly stops the attack in midair. The big guy is completely shocked to see his punch stopped in midair. It turns out the guild leader stopped him and says that this is one of his regrets. With impressive strength, he throws the man, who is caught off guard. Our leader threw Richard hard, making him crash violently to the ground. Determined, he regrets not having done that much earlier to his enemy. Lying on the ground, the mustache man stares at the leader, unable to get up. Then the big guy insults him and says he's still as naive as ever. He says the leader will regret this, just as a man in a long coat approaches. The man warns him not to mess with a member of the famous B-rank guild called Chinlima. Then the stranger introduces himself as the guild leader and asks what they are doing to his member. Meanwhile, Sangwoo was testing some weapons in the store. He examines a new sword and thinks the length seems perfect for him. He also tests the weapon's weight and finds it quite fitting. Suddenly, the notebook the author gave him falls to the ground and opens on its own. The hooded guy looks at it and recalls the Thunder Emperor's notebook. Curious, he picks it up and starts looking through the sketches and notes. He realizes it's a strategy to defeat a giant B-rank skeleton. Then the swordsman notices the author wrote everything down step by step and is very surprised. The writer admits that his initial plan was a failure because he didn't take his teammates into account. Reading that, the new guild member becomes completely confused by what's written. Soon after, the notebook shows that the team's veterans came up with a new battle strategy on their own. Flipping through the pages, he finds more drawings detailing their new attack plan. The tactic involved distracting the monster and striking its core continuously at the same time. In the end, they managed to defeat the B-rank boss through their own effort and teamwork. So the swordsman concludes that, according to the note, the story was quite different from what he thought. With the notebook in hand, the hooded guy thinks maybe he misunderstood everything. Suddenly, he hears something break and turns around to see what happened. He looks back, confused by the commotion that just started. We see the Chinlima leader standing, staring with contempt at the other guild's master. The man in a long coat insults him and says he deserved it for insulting one of their members. Out of control, the man with glasses grabs him violently by the neck and lifts him off the ground. He yells, asking how a C-rank piece of trash dares to mess with someone from his guild. Struggling, the guild master says it's all just a big misunderstanding. At that moment, a store employee runs toward them and asks what's going on. Then the manager tells the Chinlima leader that even as a VIP, he can't cause trouble. Hearing this, the staff member warns that the store belongs to the Hunter Association and the fight could be a problem. The Chinlima leader apologizes for the commotion but claims the others started the fight. He says the C-rank team insulted him even though he was minding his own business. Faced with this, the man with glasses asks the manager if VIP treatment isn't part of his performance evaluation. With a wicked smile, he asks who the manager thinks is more important. Then the Chinlima leader says he's sure the manager will make the wisest decision. With a nervous smile, the employee agrees and says he misunderstood the whole situation. At that moment, the team gets furious because the man didn't even listen to them and already took the other guild's side. The manager apologizes but warns that if they don't cooperate, things will get complicated. The guys are shocked and angry at the injustice happening right there in the store. At that moment, the Chinlima members mock them, and the swordsman says he understands what's going on. The hooded guy says that if they're low-ranked, they're just expected to accept that treatment. But he adds that, unfortunately for them, his team isn't C-rank. The enemy group and the manager are shocked and confused by the guy's revelation. Richard yells that they're definitely just a bunch of C-rank hunters. Out of control, the big man tries to attack the swordsman and asks who he thinks he is. But with ease, the new guild member grabs his enemy's hand in midair. He warns him to stay quiet because soon the others will know whether he's lying or not. Right after, the mustached man feels intense pain and wonders what kind of monstrous strength that is. Then the swordsman asks the manager to check the guild's information, and he complies. But the guild master approaches the manager and confirms that they really are rank C. He bows and apologizes for the confusion, promising they'll leave shortly. This leaves the swordsman completely shocked, unable to understand his team leader's behavior. He shouts and asks what the other is doing, saying there's no need to listen to that nonsense. In response, the guild master says that with his help, the problem would have been solved, but there's a catch. He goes on to say that they may not be rank S, but the new member is. He adds that, of course, they can grow together as a team. But he refuses to engage in pathetic behavior and boasts about something that isn't his. Hearing this, the hooded guy seems to finally understand his teammate's attitude. He thinks to himself that he can't believe how wrongly he judged these people. With that, the leader calls the team to leave, and the swordsman realizes he was the one blinded by ranks. At that moment, the Chinlima leader shouts and tells the C-ranks to leave or he'll show them what happens. But the new guild member gets furious at the threat and glares at the man with intense anger. Suddenly, the man with glasses takes a strong and unexpected blow that knocks him forward. He falls face first to the ground, confused about what just happened to him. Then we see the swordsman standing behind him, warning him not to move again. Seongwoo had grabbed the man in the coat by the back of the neck, saying that the right thing is to make those who threaten you submit. The new member wonders if at least this much is something he can do without causing more problems. Suddenly, the mustached man pulls out a knife and prepares to attack the group of hunters. Out of control, the big guy charges with a weapon, screaming that they should all die. But then he is struck by something that sends him flying backward. It was the team leader who protected the swordsman from Richard's cowardly attack from behind. Exhausted, he says that it looks like now they need each other's help, and the swordsman smiles over his shoulder. Lying on the ground, the mustached man yells for the store manager to call the hunter police. A staff member approaches, frightened, and asks if he's okay. Richard Bear replies no and orders the manager to get rid of those useless guys, but he's completely ignored, because the manager was referring to the swordsman, whom he had recognized as the demon sword. The Cheonlima members are completely shocked by the staff member's revelation. Then the swordsman says it's okay, these things can happen, but there's a catch. He then throws the Cheonlima leader to the ground with great force, and asks the store manager to please take care of that trash for him. He calls his guild to leave while the Cheonlima leader, now desperate, gets up. Soon after, the rival guild members and the manager bow and apologize for all the trouble. Finally, the group leaves the mall and the golden statue of the Thunder Emperor. The Demon Sword thinks that he still doesn't understand why the writer joined that guild. But one thing he's sure of, when one of his teammates calls out to him. The redhead asks if he wasn't the one who chose the Ego Sword earlier. The others tell him to stop with the nonsense, but the guy insists he heard a voice. Then the guildmaster jokes that even if the sword had eyes, it would never call him, but adds that you never know. At that, the Demon Sword smiles, thinking he's joined a very interesting and fun place. Back at the guild's headquarters, a delivery arrives and a package is left at the front door. The team leader sees the black envelope and wonders if it's the weapons they bought at the store. He picks up the letter from the ground and wonders what could be inside the mysterious envelope. Then he opens the mail and begins reading the long text written on the paper. As he reads the letter, his face shows complete shock at the information he just received. Meanwhile, the writer is at home when he receives a call praising his recent writing. The guy with glasses smiles and thanks the person on the other end of the line for the sincere compliment. Then the man on the phone says that with more content, they can move to the next step, and the author becomes interested. At that moment, the editor reveals he was talking about the launch evaluation of his story. Upon hearing that, the writer is completely shocked and speechless at the big news. The editor explains that the platform will evaluate it, but the company has already given a positive response. The author says he understands and promises to keep working hard to pass the evaluation. After hanging up, he stares at the phone for a moment, still deep in thought about the conversation. Suddenly, the writer celebrates joyfully, finally achieving something important. Smiling, he thinks that at last his work was accepted by someone. He then remembers that it's just an evaluation, but it's already a big step for him. With that, he feels motivated to take the opportunity and keep writing. Hours pass and morning turns into night. Then the writer slumps onto his keyboard, discouraged because he hasn't written a single word. He thinks that he already used all the guild events and now has no more material. Shortly after, the guy with glasses thinks it would be nice if something interesting happened for him to use as reference. Meanwhile, in a modern building at night, a man is visibly stressed about something. He sighs, exhausted, looking completely worn out by his work problems. Sitting at his desk, the president complains that the situation is driving him crazy. With his hands together, he thinks the time for that insane banquet has come once again. Then the chapter title appears on the screen, Ranker's Guide to Live a Normal Life. We then see a banquet for the top 10 guilds of South Korea in a luxurious hall. The event takes place every 2 years so the top guilds can exchange important information. But the men in suits seem to have forgotten that and only fight for power among themselves. Because of this, what was meant to be a celebration has become a real battlefield between the guilds. Faced with this, the man in the suit feels stomach pain just thinking about mediating all that chaos. He thinks that either way, the 4 top guilds will dominate the event again. Then the man with glasses thinks the mad demon showed up, but another unexpected name appeared too. But he knows that's still not enough to surpass the guilds that have been at the top for decades. Soon after, the man checks the guest list and notices the same names and faces as always. However, he's surprised to notice something different on the list. With a wicked smile, he thinks that maybe this year's event will be more interesting. Then the boss turns and tells his secretary to start preparing for the banquet. The secretary wonders why, since he always hated the event, but the boss says this time is different. On the list, we see the name of the guild Galwa Mansesong in 6th position among the best. Elsewhere, a white-haired man with a scar watches the city through a window. Arms crossed, the old man wonders if it's really been that long since the last time. Far away, a blue-haired man meditates in silence in a brightly lit room. He thinks about what the others are doing and concludes that the current situation is very good. In a temple, a bald master sits in front of a huge painting of a dragon. With red prayer beads in hand, he seems to be waiting for something important to happen. Then the man in dark glasses wonders if it's already time to see those disgusting faces again. Far away on a mountain, a long-haired swordsman observes the surrounding landscape. He holds his sword and thinks that for this banquet, he has a different kind of hope. He hopes that someone will show up so he can test his new sword. Elsewhere, a person walks away from a dark alley, leaving several men unconscious behind. The mysterious figure lights a cigarette, clearly irritated about something. Soon after, a woman in a suit complains that she has no desire to attend that boring event. Meanwhile, at the guild, the team reads the invitation to the banquet of the top 10 guilds in Korea. The teammates are shocked and wonder if it's real that they're in 6th place in the country. But the guild master panics since he's only a C rank and has no idea what to do there. One of the members jokes that their leader will be dining with the masters of S-rank guilds. Then the leader imagines himself being served as food to dark and powerful men. The thought of being devoured by the others leaves him completely pale and terrified. With all the stress and pressure, the guild master ends up fainting and collapsing to the floor. His teammates quickly rush to help him, while the author and the swordsman just watch the scene. They comment to each other that there's never a day of peace and quiet in that crazy guild. The demon sword says that going to the banquet might give him some good material for the story. He then asks if the author ever went to the event back when he was still the Thunder Emperor, saying that it might have been a long time since the guy with glasses last attended. But with a disgusted look, the writer says there's no way he's going to that event. He remembers when he was the Thunder Emperor and everyone praised him for his achievements. Back then, they congratulated him for conquering 10 SS rank gates all on his own. They called him a hero and one of the 12 apostles, even though he was just a student. Everyone was sure he'd soon become the strongest hunter in the entire world. But the blonde boy never understood the hype about being the strongest and a hero, so everyone raised their glasses in his honor. But the Thunder Emperor found it all so boring. Returning to the present, the writer reaffirms that he's not going, and the demon's sword is surprised. From the floor, the guild master says that if the author isn't going, then he doesn't want to attend either. The guy with glasses and the swordsman both look at the leader, surprised as he suddenly starts laughing. He stands up with a dark aura and asks if they really aren't going. With a furious look, he questions why their guild suddenly became S-rank. Clutching his own arm, he shouts, asking who made them the 6th best guild in Korea. Pointing at the duo, he demands to know why they shouldn't go to the banquet. With a face full of rage, he yells that they would never have had the chance to be invited. Then, with a terrifying smile, the leader asks again if they really aren't planning to go to the event. Terrified, the two hug each other and shout that yes, they are going. Of course they're going. Satisfied, he turns his back to them, and the author whispers to his friend that he was scared of that murderous intent. Afterward, the writer slumps into his chair and thinks that remembering the old days makes him uncomfortable. But he sighs and decides that since things have come to this, he might as well go and gather material for the story. On the day of the event, the hall is packed with guests and photographers along the red carpet. The banquet organizer shakes hands with one of the guests and greets him politely. He wipes the sweat from his brow and thinks that now that the A-rank guilds have entered, only the top ones are left. Photographers and paparazzi start buzzing and snapping photos with flashes everywhere. The reason for all the excitement is that the highly anticipated S-rank guilds have finally arrived. Seeing this, the organizer becomes tense because he knows the most troublesome ones are about to show up. The first to arrive is the Parthenon Guild, ranked 2nd nationally. Next comes the 9 Dragons Guild, the 4th strongest in the country. Right after that, the Extreme Martial Guild arrives, taking 3rd place in the ranking. Then the Non-Target Guild also makes an appearance at the banquet, being the 5th most powerful in Korea. At that moment, reporters comment on the great guilds and how Non-Target has grown stronger with the Mad Demon. Suddenly, footsteps echo through the main hall, signaling the arrival of someone important. Everything seems to stop with the arrival of that particular guild. The Guardian Guild enters the venue with an overwhelming and imposing presence. After all, they are the #1 guild in the country and have remained at the top for a long time. Reporters comment that with 4 S-rank hunters, they are the kings of the community. Meanwhile, outside, a white car screeches to a halt at the entrance of the event. The members of Gawa Manseseong step out, and the leader scolds one of them for his driving. The guy replies that the main character always arrives late, and the master sarcastically thanks him. But the leader suddenly stops and realizes something strange is happening inside the hall. He notices that all the reporters and guests are staring at them in complete silence. One of the members asks if they arrived too late, but the master says it's not because they're the protagonists. Far away, one of the guests smiles and says it's been a while since he's seen something so entertaining. The other guild leaders watch the scene and wonder whether they're bold or just reckless. The members of Guardian comment that they've been at the top for 20 years and are very proud of it. Hearing that, the leader of Galway admits he's scared because stealing the spotlight from the strongest guild wasn't a good idea. Then the leader of Guardian smiles and seems to view their arrival as a direct challenge. At that moment, the other guild leaders are shocked to see the Blade King laughing like that. Suddenly, one of the guild masters realizes who the powerful elder is actually looking at. His eyes are fixed on the demon's sword, who doesn't seem to care about the attention. The master then understands that all of this is because of the young swordsman from the new guild. After all, an S-rank hunter is a valuable asset capable of shifting the power of any faction. He also knows that the demon's sword rejected all offers, but that's only what people say. He thinks that if there's any personal connection between the two, his plans might fail. Now the long-haired man grows worried that everything he planned could fall apart. In light of this, the Blade King thinks the situation is unexpected and must be uncomfortable for the author. Far away, the master of the Extreme Martial Guild also notices the presence of the demon's sword. He thinks that although the young man is a genius, he hasn't yet reached their level for a duel. His disciple then tugs on his sleeve to get his attention. The long-haired man asks what it is, and the young one asks who that person is. The master assumes he's referring to the demon's sword, but the disciple wasn't talking about him. He points to the writer and says he's talking about that person standing next to him. He explains to his master that he can sense an overwhelming power coming from the guy with glasses, saying he feels an energy so strong that not even everyone in the hall together could defeat him. On stage, the event organizer thanks everyone for coming to the banquet of the top 10 guilds. He hopes the event helps strengthen the bonds between all colleagues present. The man then finishes his speech and everyone in the hall starts applauding. The organizer asks the guild leaders to follow him to another room. He informs everyone that in the meantime, the other members can enjoy the dinner in the main hall. One of Gawa's members tells his master it's time for him to go to the other room. But the guild leader is terrified and wonders if he'll make it out of that meeting alive. Yongsik tries to cheer him up and says the good food will make him forget all his worries. Songwoo agrees with a smile and tells his boss to go and enjoy the dinner. Still anxious, the leader tries to calm himself, thinking it's just a dinner and nothing will happen. But in the leader's room, the master of Extreme Martial slams the table in a rage. He glares at the leader of Parthenon and angrily asks if she wants to die. But the woman remains unfazed and with a red aura, says she accepts his challenge. The two powerful masters stare each other down, ready to fight, while the others watch. In the middle of them, the Gawa leader realizes with horror that something truly awful is happening. The scene flashes back to 10 minutes earlier with the guild leader enjoying his meal. He watches the other masters chatting and notices the mood in the room seems calm. This helps the guild leader relax, thinking he worried for nothing. But on the other side of the table, the atmosphere is much heavier among the stronger leaders. Suddenly, the master of extreme martial speaks up, saying they've been indifferent to the new member. He then asks the Blade King for an introduction, and the Gawa leader immediately chokes on his food. The powerful elder simply stares at the other master and asks if he can really do that once. But the Blade King says he also just met the young man and can't introduce him. So the bald master smiles and says he thought the veteran seemed familiar with the demon's sword. The older man firmly denies it and claims he has no connection to the young man or his guild. The other master says he understands, while the Gawa leader continues choking on his food. He tries to say something to intervene, but panic prevents his voice from coming out. Then the master of extreme martial turns to him and asks if he can do the introduction himself. The Gawa leader is so desperate that the only thing he can think of is to ask for water. Everyone at the table is surprised by the tension forming among the guild masters. The leader of 9 dragons smiles and finds the situation very entertaining to watch. But the Blade King seems bothered and wonders if this is a sign of dissatisfaction. The master of extreme martial looks at Manseong nervously and asks what he's doing. Then the leader of the Parthenon guild slams the table and bursts into loud laughter at all the chaos. She says the Gawa leader is funny and that thanks to him, she got to see a great show. She then points at the bald man and says he needs to fix his personality. Angry, the master of extreme martial slams the table and releases his powerful aura. He glares at her furiously and asks if she wants to die right there. Despite the threat, the leader isn't intimidated and says she accepts the challenge to fight him. The 2 powerful masters lock eyes and the tension in the room rises even more. Because of that, the Gawa guild leader becomes desperate and wonders how things got to this point. He tries to step in, but the leader of non-target speaks in his place, asking them to pick another time and place for the fight. He comments that their behavior is extremely vulgar. The 2 aggressive masters turn to him, surprised by the sudden interruption. At that moment, the long-haired man mocks him, saying he acts noble, but is just a swordsman. In response, the swordsman draws his blade and demands a duel to settle things once and for all. The long-haired man accepts the challenge, unleashing a powerful blue aura. The strongest masters decide it's time to settle their differences. But then a crushing purple aura explodes in the room, and a voice orders them to stop fighting. The other leaders are shocked by the sudden intervention from the veteran of Guardian. The Blade King says the atmosphere is too tense, and it's best to put an end to this. Faced with this, the weaker masters are stunned by the veteran's power, which surpasses even other S ranks. One of the men feels a crushing pressure all over his body because of the aura. He is shocked when he realizes something. The master of Gawa's guild withstood the pressure without even flinching. He's stunned to see that it's the leader of the guild ranked 6th in the country. But in reality, the poor guy had completely fainted from the pressure. Meanwhile, in the main hall, the author is bored and thinks he shouldn't have come. One of his friends is amazed by something he just saw. They're looking at a beautiful woman in a brown and white suit, calmly sipping her wine. Suddenly, the author breaks his pen in frustration, his expression blank. The swordsman says he found that surprising, while Ian says he's going to throw up. He remembers the time he met the writer's older sister at his house. He just wonders if the woman in the hall is the same person he saw back then. While our boy argues with Songwoo, the Crimson Flame, despite her calm gaze, realizes they're talking about her. She then wonders why her brother came to an event he hates so much. From afar, the lady observes a group of men, and one of them comments on how many people are gathered. The bald man then demands a fight. He approaches the woman and mocks her, asking if she's playing queen. With a defiant smile, the bald man invites her to a duel right in the middle of the banquet. Then the bald leader challenges her to a fight and tells her to stop wasting time with rookies. Surprised by the invitation, the woman questions him and finds the situation quite amusing. He says that, aside from the leaders of the 4 major guilds, she's the strongest newcomer in the S rank. He then insults her, saying she's just playing with fire, and the woman remains silent. Seeing this, the Demon Blade gets up wanting to help, but the author stops him. Then he says the gorilla doesn't like anyone meddling in her business, making the swordsman tense. Soon after, the woman named Yizio clenches her fist tightly, trying to keep herself from exploding. The bald man is the leader of 9 dragons, and a fight there could spark a war between guilds. Yizio then stands up from her chair and tells the man to think whatever he wants about her. He mocks her, asking if she's running away in fear, but a voice orders him to stop. A member of the Guardian Guild steps in, saying that this is not the place for that kind of fight. But the bald man laughs and provokes Crimson Flame, asking why she hides behind others. With that, Yizio becomes furious and says to herself that she can't hold back any longer. Suddenly, the young woman saw something and looked confused. The swordsman decided to intervene, walking toward the problem. The man, who reveals himself as High Mountain Junghong Cha, speaks again, telling them to stop while his partner, White Physique Hugh Jun, watches. At that moment, Black Mark Kim Dojin also appears and commands the vicious dog to stop. Demon Sword then gets irritated and says he can no longer listen to the nonsense coming from that man. But the bald man just lets out a mocking laugh and asks if all the S-ranks have gathered for the grand party that's about to begin. With a green aura, he prepares for battle and says they're about to have a real match. The man says they can now finally determine the power hierarchy among them. He continues saying not all S-ranks are equal, and that he's always been dissatisfied. Then he declares he wants to find out once and for all who is the strongest. From afar, the author thinks that nothing has changed. There have always been fools wanting to show off. He doesn't understand the obsession with being the strongest while his friends panic over the situation. Some of the guests ask if no one is going to stop the fight, but another replies, asking how to stop 5 S ranks. The guests then agree that they need to flee before the chaos really begins. Then the bald man concentrates his green energy in his hands, ready for the first strike. Seeing this, the other 4 hunters take up combat stances for the great battle. Suddenly, the sound of clapping echoes, and a voice says that this is enough for everyone. The president of the association announces that the banquet is not a place for fights. He warns that if the disturbance doesn't stop, the association will punish all the guilds. At this, the leader of the 9 dragons and his subordinates stare at each other cautiously. The tattooed bald man clicks his tongue and says he got the president's message. The 9 dragons' sub-leader apologizes for the inconvenience, and the head of the association asks for more caution. He then apologizes for what happened and says his guild will withdraw. As they leave, the master of the Parthenon says something interesting happened while he was away. He teases the veteran about the Crimson Flame becoming his successor. The older man simply thanks him for the advice and continues walking in silence. But then a purple aura emanates from him as he offers his own advice. The veteran says that those who only think about bringing others down are not worthy of being king, and tells the other to give up, saying he should understand his own place. Both the master of the Parthenon and the bald man are paralyzed with fear due to the overwhelming aura of the guardian leader. He is shocked and breaks into a cold sweat under the immense pressure of the Blade King's aura. The Blade King says he figured his rival would understand his message. With a threatening look, the other confirms he got the message. Then he turns and warns that one day the other master will have to give up his position. Far away, his partner asks what they will do now that their plan has been discovered. The leader of the Parthenon says he was already expecting this, and now there's no turning back. He calls the veteran a fool and says that if he doesn't step down, they'll remove him by force, saying they should prepare for war. Doang thinks his rivals are full of foolish ideas and refuse to see reality. Behind him, the author approaches his master, Hyung Nim, asking if he's alright. Then Master Doang thinks that above the king, there's a true god. Meanwhile, the Goa Guild tries to help their unconscious leader, and Songwoo asks Yongzik to get the car quickly, saying they'll leave it to the other 2 to take care of the poor man. On the other hand, the author is desperate because he hasn't gotten any scoops for his book and doesn't know what he'll tell his editor. Suddenly, someone behind him asks for a moment to speak with him. Soon after, the group turns and sees that it's the master of extreme martial arts seeking his attention. Demon Sword asks how he can help, but the man says he's not here to talk to him. The master of extreme martial arts says he has matters to discuss with the young man next to him. The author is shocked and looks over his shoulder, unable to believe the man wants to speak with him. They go to a more private spot, and the master of extreme martial arts thanks the author for following him. He replies that he was already on his way out, so it wasn't a problem to accompany him. Without beating around the bush, the young man directly asks what business the guild leader wants to discuss. In this way, the master of extreme martial arts takes a sip of tea and comments on the writer's objectivity. Then he calls his disciple Suyun, who promptly responds to his master at his side. Faced with this, the man reveals that his apprentice possesses a secret ability unknown to the world. At that moment, the disciple's eyes shine intensely with a mysterious bluish light. This ability is called the demonic eye, and its power is truly quite peculiar. With this gift, he can see his opponent's abilities and even their weaknesses. Demon Sword thinks to himself that this is an absurd and incredible advantage in any battle. He realizes that if extreme martial arts uses this, the balance between the 4 guilds will be broken. But the master tells the author not to be mistaken, as he does not intend to use this information for evil. He explains that he has been sharpening his blade at the edge between life and death. It was by using the demonic eye that he discovered the writer is a very strong opponent. Therefore, he bows respectfully and asks the young man for a duel. The author smiles in relief, thinking that for a moment he believed he had been found out. He had already seen the heavenly sword and was going to ask them to keep it a secret if they discovered him. Then the writer imagines that the demonic eye would be a very interesting element for a story, until Suyun calls his master. At that, the writer closes his eyes for a moment, processing the entire situation. He accepts the duel, but says that the guild master must grant him a request as well. And with that, chapter 29 of the story begins, showing the title. Moments later, in a courtyard, the 2 position themselves for the long-awaited battle. Then the young man with glasses confidently says that the opponent may begin whenever he is ready. With a serious look, the silver-haired man grips the handle of his sword. He sees the young man's hands in his pockets and asks if he's really that confident. With that, the master says he will gladly accept the young man's offer and challenge. Unsheathing his blade, a powerful blue aura begins to emanate from his sword. The silver-haired man then rushes toward the author to strike. Demon Sword is shocked by the master's ability to close the distance in the blink of an eye. Both opponents stare each other down with determined and serious expressions, ready for the great clash. At that moment, the master strikes with his sword, but the author quickly dodges with a backward leap. Then the young man with glasses thinks that his opponent is definitely faster than Songwoo. He is surprised when the swordsman charges at him again for another strike. With an impressive movement, the writer bends backward, narrowly escaping the blade. He wonders if the master predicted his escape route and decides to take his hands out of his pockets. Seeing this, the guild leader becomes irritated with the situation and finds it all ridiculous. At that moment, the master believes that his technique of continuous attacks also controls the enemy's actions. He thinks the writer will move exactly the way he guides him during the fight, but the older man believes it is impossible to dodge a second perfect strike. However, the young man continues to evade the blows with astonishing ease. After yet another dodge, the author lands on the ground and says the fight is getting interesting. From afar, Demon Sword wonders if this is the famous heavenly sword. His sword begins to speak to him, saying that the master's style is different, but there's much to learn from his movements. The silver-haired man then prepares for a new attack, gripping the sword with both hands. With that, he unleashes a powerful technique, creating a storm of blades in the courtyard. The author watches the technique with a confident smile on his face, showing no fear. He feels as if the attacks are coming from all directions at once. But the young man with glasses thinks that no matter what kind of attack his opponent uses, he knows there are always openings for a precise counterattack. With that, the writer moves through the storm and thinks it's been a long time since he faced a sword this fast. He realizes that it seems impossible to dodge everything completely without taking any damage. With a firm step, the young man stops and the ground beneath his feet begins to crack under the pressure. The silver-haired man concludes that there is no way he can win this fight. Defeated, he admits to himself that he simply cannot beat the young writer. Even feeling powerless for the first time, he does not let go of his sword for one reason. The guildmaster wants to use this opportunity to break through his own limits as a swordsman. With a determined smile, he says he'll simply keep swinging his blade to the end. At that moment, the silver-haired man unleashes his most powerful technique called Revolution. Right after, Demon's Sword is shocked by the incredible energy the master's attack released. He wonders if the guild leader concentrated all that power into a single slashing strike. A golden aura of lightning begins to form around the author, standing still in the middle of the attack. His hair turns blonde and he extends his hand, saying this is a reward for having entertained him. With that, an absurd amount of golden energy explodes from the young man's body all at once. The energy then takes the shape of a giant bird, and the technique is called Thunderbird. Thunderbird collides with the master's attack in an explosion of light that blinds everyone. On the ground, the master smiles and thinks he had forgotten something very important about the world. He reflects that while they reign as kings in the world of hunters, something else exists. Soon after, the older man realizes that above them all, there is a god, and he is in awe of that power. The next day, a peaceful scene shows the guild headquarters with a view of the sea and a bird on the roof. We then see the writer enjoying a feast, stuffing his cheeks with food. Seated at the table, the master asks if the food is to the young man's liking, and he eagerly confirms. The silver-haired man observes the young one eating and finds the whole situation quite interesting. He recalls that the previous day, the writer's presence was overwhelming and difficult to approach. But now looking at him eating, the young man seems like just an ordinary, harmless kid. At that moment, the young man notices the older man's fixed gaze and asks if there's something wrong with his face. The guild leader apologizes and comments on how different he looks from the day of the fight. With his mouth still full, the writer asks what exactly the swordsman is imagining. Faced with that, the master wonders how the other guilds will react to the return of the Thunder Emperor, and the young man asks if it would make any difference. With a confident smile, the silver-haired man says it will obviously make a huge difference. He explains that the fact the Emperor is joining a guild and attending the banquet of the top 10 is a clear sign that the Thunder Emperor is resuming his activities as a hunter. That way, the leader believes the others will realize how foolish it was to fight for a throne until now. Then the writer corrects him, saying that although he has returned, it was only for personal reasons. Right after, the guild leader looks confused by the response and asks what the young man means by that. The writer explains that he's been busy writing and accepted the duel because he wanted to learn more about the demonic eye for his story. Then the master began to ask something. With a serious expression, he asks if the author simply plans to watch the current hunter world of Korea from the sidelines. He says that the power struggle among Korean hunters has always been normal, but now it's more noticeable than ever. In the past, everyone had to hold their breath due to the existence of a powerful deity known as the Thunder Emperor. His presence served to suppress the desires and ambitions of the four major guilds. However, after the strongest of all suddenly disappeared, the balance was broken. Those who lusted for power began revealing their hidden desires to the world. And over time, those ambitions grew so much that a war could break out at any moment. Back at the table, Songwoo thinks the idea of a war between guilds is simply ridiculous. He says it doesn't matter how powerful the guilds are because public opinion wouldn't allow it. He then adds that by choosing the path of the blade, he has no desire for power. At that moment, the master says that for Demon Monk and Divine Spear, it's different because they want the throne. He doesn't know the exact moment, but he's sure they will fight against the Guardian. With that, the silver-haired man remembers that the writer's relationship with the Blade King was only superficial. With a serious look, the swordsman asks if the author is simply going to stand by and watch. The author replies that everyone should handle their own matters because he holds no responsibility in this. At that moment, the older man thinks the young man with glasses is merely showing his immaturity. He realizes that the boy pretends to be fine but can't hide his complex emotions. The Heavenly Blade says he understands and decides to ask the young man a different question. Then he asks the author to tell his story and explain his decisions. Surprised by the request, the young writer asks if the man truly wants to hear his story. Then the silver-haired man says something seems to be bothering the young man and that sharing it might help. In response, the boy with glasses says his story probably won't be very interesting. With that, he begins his story, and we see the doors of a hospital along with the sound of a baby crying. In the delivery room, the doctors and his mother are shocked by what they are witnessing. Shortly after, the newborn author was floating and emitting lightning from his body while crying. He says that since he couldn't control his powers, his parents raised him using rubber gloves. And when he finally learned to control himself, his sister awakened like an enraged gorilla. His sister released fire and he lightning, but their parents wanted them to live as normal people. However, the siblings weren't exactly obedient and ended up destroying a monster on the street. After the fight, the author says he was hungry, but his sister still wanted to play a bit more. Suddenly, a mysterious voice grabs the attention of the two young siblings in the middle of the road. A man approaches and holds the boy's hand with a look of pure gratitude. Overcome with emotion, the man thanks the two, saying they saved his life and his family's. Soon, the people saved by the siblings gather around them to thank them as well. A woman asks how they could repay the kindness of the two young heroes. Looking at the young author, one of the men calls him a hero for his incredible actions. With a surprised and emotional look, the boy wonders if he truly is a hero. Still just children, they continued fighting monsters whenever portals appeared in the city. As a result, guild and association recruiters began searching for the young heroes. But their father would ask everyone to leave as he didn't want his children involved in the hunter world. Their mother, watching the crowd and her children, listened as the father insisted they could only get involved when they were adults. The matriarch believed that day would come, but thought it was too soon for their identities to be revealed. She worried that soon they'd be approached more aggressively by guilds and associations. Her daughter asked if being a hunter was fun, but the mother was concerned as the girl was impulsive. At least she thought her son was fine, since he always hated trouble and conflict. But in that moment, looking to the side, she realized the boy was no longer there. Desperate, the mother asked where he had gone as she searched for him everywhere. Suddenly, she hears her son calling her from outside and looks up. The boy appears floating outside and shouts that he wants to become a hero for everyone. At that moment, the crowd of reporters and photographers goes wild at the young boy's powerful declaration. The mother screams in surprise, not understanding her son's wish, while his father falls to his knees. In the end, after all the commotion, the parents ended up respecting the boy's decision and supporting him. Then the little boy confirms his choice with a smile and a yes to his mother. And that was how he began his life as a hunter under the management of the organization. Standing in front of his first portal, he asks if he just needs to step in. His journey begins as he enters an S-rank portal, showing his electrical power. After that, he cleared double S-rank portals with no difficulty. Then he reached triple S-rank portals, displaying immense power. With a smile on his face, he found it all very easy and simple to handle. For the young hero, the portals weren't challenges. They were a playground. Whenever a portal appeared in the city, the boy would run to be the first to enter. And in no time, everyone would see the young hero emerging victorious from the challenge. However, upon exiting, he would be confused by what was happening outside the portal. At that moment, the crowd would call him a hero for clearing triple S-rank portals all by himself. All that attention and applause were enough to make the boy's heart race. With that, he became completely immersed in the game of being a hero in that place. But over time, the boy grew up and no longer found fun in that game. He felt it was time to leave that playground, but he had to stay. Even with everyone hailing him as the Thunder Emperor, he only felt boredom and emptiness. Looking at the destroyed city, the young hero felt like something was missing, and he realized that it was no longer fun being the hero everyone expected him to be. Yet the world still needed heroes because portals kept appearing without warning, bringing monsters. And with that, the creatures invaded the world, forcing the young man to fight nonstop. So he continued living as a hero, protecting people from those threats. People admired him for his deeds, but the young man felt absolutely nothing. Soon, the child who had grown up no longer felt excitement from the attention or happiness in his playground. He hadn't worked hard to become a hero, so he felt no sense of accomplishment. He remembers when he spoke with an elderly mage who challenged him to a duel. He explains that he had been stuck in a very boring daily routine lately. A silver-haired old man then starts laughing at the whole situation. Right after, the boy with golden hair looks confused by the reaction and asks why he's laughing. The mage finds it amusing that a little kid acts as if he's seen the entire world, and the hero says he's not a kid. Then the old man asks if the boy finds the life of a hunter boring. Honestly, he says it's kind of like that, and that when he was young, he wanted to be a hero. But after becoming one, he doesn't feel anything at all from his accomplishments. With that, the older man comments that maybe that's natural, and the young man is puzzled by the remark. Holding his staff, the mage asks the emperor to look up at the night sky. He explains that people face dilemmas like that dark sky, unable to see the answer. But they never stop, and each finds their own meaning to light the darkness like stars. With that, the mage advises the Thunder Emperor to find his own meaning. That way he wouldn't wander aimlessly in the darkness and would know which star to follow. Thoughtful, the young man wonders what his own meaning for everything might be. Then he says that the idea of finding meaning sounds pretty cheap. Continuing, he says that whenever he hears this kind of talk, he can only endure it to the end. Back to the narrative, despite his firm resolve, his journey was interrupted by a summons. The emergency had arisen. A triple S-rank portal had appeared in the middle of Seoul, and he abandoned his path. With a determined look, the hero replies that he will move immediately toward the threat. He did so because he had seen with his own eyes who the true heroes were. The scene then shows a chaotic battle where many hunters fight desperately. An older man asks Hyujin about reinforcements, but he can't get a signal. With that, the Blade King shouts that it's absurd to retreat and that they can't give up. With a serious expression, he thinks about the consequences if they abandon the fight now. He then asks himself who would protect the people if they simply walked away. At that instant, the giant creature prepares a powerful energy attack in its mouth. However, the Thunder Emperor appears floating behind the monster. With immense power, he uses his technique, Thunder Wheel, against the giant creature. At that moment, the young hero's hand glows with strong, golden electricity. A massive lightning strike surrounds the monster in a gigantic and fatal explosion. Below, one of the civilians recognizes the famous hunter and feels relieved by his presence. Then the crowd shouts that they are saved because the hero has finally arrived to help. However, the writer reveals that even with all the applause, he still had doubts. To him, the true heroes weren't the ones everyone could see, but those fighting on the ground. Those who fought without giving up, risking their own lives to save the innocent. In this way, the young man begins to question whether he could truly call himself a hero, since he was simply born strong and nothing more. With that, countless thoughts flooded his mind, but he couldn't organize them. So from that day forward, he gave up being a hero and stopped searching for meaning in his life. Just then, his phone rings and the call is from Association President Park Dae-han. After that day, he informed the association that he only wanted to fight in high-risk portals. With that, he stopped living as a hero and enjoyed a normal life as Taiyan. However, he quickly grew tired of that peaceful and monotonous routine at home. Staring at the ceiling, the boy with glasses thinks about how boring that life had become. Even as time passed and he became an adult, the feeling of boredom only got worse. Elsewhere, a young blonde man is called by the name Kazuya by one of his companions. In response, the friend says he seems calmer now since before he didn't care much for good manners. Then Kazuya places his hand on his friend's shoulder and prepares to continue the conversation. With a smile, he simply replies that people change, and that's completely normal. The other boy then falls silent, seemingly surprised by the blonde's mature attitude. He wondered if he was the only one standing still while everyone else was moving forward, but didn't dwell on it. Back in the present, the author was already tired of headaches and living an ordinary day. But a turning point came while he and his sister were relaxing in the living room. At that moment, the girl laughed a lot and asked her brother to share the link to what she was watching. He then picked up his phone to see what his sister had sent that was so funny. The link led to a web novel called From F-Rank Hunter to Hero, which was very popular. Surprised, the author wondered if it really was an online story the girl was reading. Curious, he began reading the first chapters of the work. He found the story more entertaining than he expected and continued reading with excitement. More than impressed, he felt he had found a new hobby to enjoy. Soon, reading web novels became part of his routine, and he grew frustrated waiting for the next chapter. To pass the time, he decided to watch some videos on his computer while he waited. That way, the young man began browsing the video platform, looking for something to watch. Suddenly, an ad on the screen caught his attention with the phrase, "Anyone can be a writer." Shortly after, the young man became thoughtful about that sentence and wondered if anyone really could write. Then an idea popped into his mind, and he considered the possibility of trying to write too. With the same curiosity and interest he had as a child, he began to write. Knowing nothing about writing, he simply typed what he wanted and found the act quite satisfying. He then published his spontaneously written story, but the views and comments were at zero. Smiling, he wondered who would read something like that, as it seemed pretty simple. But to his surprise, he saw a comment from someone who enjoyed the read. The glasses-wearing young man was shocked and blushed at the first positive comment he received. A smile appeared on his face, and he began to think about maybe writing a little more. At the same time he was considering this, they had successfully invaded the Gate of Chaos. Soon after, the blonde replied that he hadn't thought about it, since with the crisis over, he wouldn't need to be a hunter anymore. Then he considered writing seriously, since it had been a long time since he had truly enjoyed himself. However, he figured he'd probably get bored soon and thought about the Thunder Emperor. At that moment, the guild master approached and asked the blonde what he wanted to do from then on. That question reminded him of something they had talked about before under the starry sky. He wasn't sure if just writing would help him find his own meaning, but he could try. So he decided to become a web novel author and see it through to the end without giving up. In this way, the scene then showed the text the author had written in his notebook for the silver-haired man. Nervously, the young man with glasses asked the silver-haired man what he thought of the story. Embarrassed, the writer said he wrote it because he felt strange saying those things out loud. Shortly after, the guild master said he could finally understand what the young man had been going through. Then the silver-haired man explained that the author's power made a portal feel like a theme park. That difference between the hero everyone saw and his true self might have caused confusion and loss. The guild leader then praised the writing and said he finally understood the writer's feelings. He remembered that one must leave a comment when they find good writing. Right after, the young man with glasses panicked and tried to stop the master from typing on the computer. The older man then said he understood why he writes and hoped he would keep following his path. He believed that by facing his doubts and untangling the knots, the young man would one day accept himself. In short, the guild leader said the author was doing very well for the time being. Then the silver-haired man said the conversation had taken a while and asked him to check with Sudim about the demonic eye. On his way out, the older man paused for a moment as if he had remembered something. With a smile, he said he'd like to read the young man's writing again next time. After the conversation, the author thought that nothing had changed, as that wasn't something anyone else could fix. But the fact that someone had read his story made his heart feel a little lighter. Elsewhere, a man asked another if he really planned to go through with it, and if he was afraid. With that, the young man says that his boss's will is also his own, but he wonders if this is the only path. Smiling, the leader says it's already too late, and that he has just received important news. He then reveals that they have already arrived as a private jet lands on the airport runway. On the tail of the plane, we see the symbol of one of the 3 largest mercenary groups in the world. Descending from the jet are members of the famous mercenary group known as the Beast. One of the members, with a robotic eye, looks around and wonders where they are now. With a confident smile, he then asks if this is their new workplace. In an abandoned warehouse, the mercenary group meets with the man who hired them. A woman opens a suitcase full of money, which is the initial payment for the job. One of the mercenaries asks if the amount is correct, and the leader of the Beast confirms that it is. The contractor then says that if everything goes well, he will pay the rest and deliver the promised items. The leader of the mercenary group lights a cigarette while listening closely to the man's words. Blowing out smoke, a mercenary then asks who the targets of their mission are. The contractor hands over an envelope with the information, and the head of the Beast goes silent for a moment. After analyzing the documents, he asks if the target is the well-known group Blue Sky Stars. The mercenary says he's heard there are S-rank specialists involved, so he wants double the payment. With a smile, the long-haired man responds that he'll even pay triple the amount. The man with the robotic eye starts laughing at what he just heard. Then he says it's refreshing as it's been a while since they've had such a fun client. Standing up from his chair, he says he'll get in touch when the operation is about to begin. As the group prepares to leave, he remembers a question. Smiling, he asks one of the members if he hadn't said he would be moving with them. The man in the blue suit replies that he'll borrow their strength, but the matter is ultimately his own. With his hand on the table, the mercenary asks him not to get in the way during a mission. Grinning darkly, the leader of the beasts says he might accidentally kill him. The mercenary group then says their goodbyes and exits the warehouse after the meeting. Concerned, the bald man asks the boss if everything will be okay, since the leader seems like a mad dog. Laughing, the contractor says that's exactly why he hired him. He explains that the mercenary isn't a trained dog, but rather a wild beast, hungry for action. The scene shifts to the writer receiving a call from his editor about the manuscript he sent. At that moment, the editor says that the new skill called Demonic Eye seems way too powerful. He explains that every problem is solved with that power, and the author starts to panic. However, the editor says the material is interesting and the young man with glasses feels very happy. The Demon Sword thinks that for someone to control the Thunder Emperor with just one word, the manager would have to be the strongest in the world. The editor suggests making the process of acquiring the eye much more dramatic. He gives the example of a powerful enemy appearing and the death of a friend awakening the power. The writer falls silent on the phone, listening carefully to the suggestions. Then the editor asks if he really needs to take the life of the protagonist's companion. He says it was just an idea, and the author replies that he'll think a bit more about it. After hanging up, the young man with glasses lets out a long sigh, clearly tired of the situation. He knows such events are necessary in a novel, but he simply doesn't want to do it, saying that he's written based on his experiences. He admits he never imagined something so tragic. However, he thinks it would be a waste to drop the idea and wonders what he should do. At that moment, Songwoo suggests that he go out for a walk, as it might bring him some good ideas. Agreeing, the young man thinks he really should get out for a bit to clear his head. He then gets up from the chair, but forgets to remove the notebook from his lap. With the sound of the device hitting the floor, the young man wonders what that noise was. That's when he looks down and realizes he dropped his notebook, and it broke completely. The scene then shifts, showing a large modern building in the city center during the day. Inside the building, a meeting has just been concluded by an older man. He suggests that everyone go out to eat together, but the girl refuses, saying she's busy. As the young woman leaves the room, the older man grumbles, calling her a brat. Then the bearded man laughs and tells the other to stop complaining, while their colleague agrees with him. With that, the white-haired man suggests that the remaining three go eat something. But the other two decline because they have a business trip to Daejeon that day. Alone in the room, the elderly man feels lonely, having been abandoned by his younger friends. Then the bearded man invites his colleague to drink together that night to make up for the missed lunch. At that moment, the boss smiles and says he'll be waiting while doing overtime at the office. Elsewhere, the long-haired girl drives furiously with a laptop on the passenger seat. On her phone, a message from her brother asks to borrow the laptop and threatens her with his sunglasses. With that, the girl thinks it's no wonder she was feeling uneasy, and that it's time to discipline her brother. Angrily, she shouts for Tai Ayan to just wait for what she's going to do to him. Suddenly, a black car crashes hard into the side of the girl's vehicle. She exits the car and collapses onto the ground. She complains about pain in her head, then sees the bald man who greets her and says she looks fine. The girl then stares at him with a serious look and a few scratches on her face. Smiling, the bald man says that today there are no old men around to protect her like last time. Elsewhere, a man in armor says he has nothing against the two young men on the ground. He simply explains that he's following his boss's orders at that moment. Meanwhile, the elderly man in his office notices that unexpected guests have arrived to visit him. With a serious expression, he knows they didn't come to invite him to lunch. At that moment, the group of mercenaries surrounds him, and the old man asks if they're really going through with it. Then the leader of Parthenon says he already answered that question for the old man before. The scene then reveals that the targets of the mercenaries were the boss and his three subordinates. With a smile, the contractor says that one day the boss would have to step down from that throne. Dramatic suspense, the last image looked like a meme. The next scene shows a massive explosion at the company building, shaking the entire structure. From the smoke caused by the blast, the shadows of people jumping can be seen. Master Do Wang climbs the building at high speed while fleeing from the mercenaries. The leader of the beast prepares to attack him with his spear, but then realizes something. The old man defends himself, their weapons clashing and creating a large blue shockwave. He manages to reach the rooftop of the building, then dropping to one knee as the enemies jump up right behind him. The mercenaries land on the rooftop as Do Wang stands back up. He knew these mercenaries were none other than the beast. With a smile, the group's leader asks if the old man knows who they are. At that moment, the boss reveals that he knows the three biggest mercenary groups in the world. The mercenary is surprised that the Blade King knows of their existence. The elderly man then calls them trash who will do anything for money, be it war or murder. He says he didn't expect them to be foolish enough to hire people like them. Then he says the names of the two off to the side, Demon Monk and Divine Spear. Smiling, the monk tells him to say whatever he wants because it won't change anything. The scene returns to the mercenary who prepares to strike the boss atop the building. Then the Demon Monk and his partner attack the old man at the same time. With a wicked smile, the long-haired man warns that the Guardian is going to disappear. Elsewhere, the red-haired girl says she knew he was crazy, but not to that extent. She then questions him about the situation and asks if he wants a guild war. Laughing, the bald man tells the Crimson Flame not to get the wrong idea about what's happening. He explains that this isn't a war the way she imagines it. With a sinister smile, the man reveals that this is actually a hunt. Upon hearing those words, the red-haired girl shows an expression of anger. In her thoughts, she believes something very strange is going on. She concludes that a lunatic being allowed to act alone must mean something bigger. With a headache, she wonders if they cooperated with Parthenon and gives up trying to think about it. A flame then appears in the girl's hand as she prepares to fight. Engulfed in fire, the young woman says she'll just do things her own way. With her body in flames, the red-haired girl charges forward to attack her enemy. But suddenly, she notices something strange and is surprised by the unexpected situation. Looking at her hand, the young woman sees that her flames are slowly fading. She wonders if her power has simply vanished, and the bald man rushes in to attack her. Taking advantage of the moment, the tattooed man lands a heavy blow to the girl's stomach. From the force of the punch, the girl is violently thrown backward by the opponent. Lying on the ground, she doubles over in pain and questions how that could have happened. Angrily, the red-haired girl asks if this is some kind of suppression barrier. Smiling, the bald man says it's something like that, but not exactly the same. He reveals that a woman is casting a spell using a large purple magic circle. Shortly after, the sorceress explains that it is, in fact, a power-sealing barrier. Furious, the Crimson Flame asks if they really had the audacity to hire mercenaries. In response, the tattooed man says yes, and that the spell seems to be working quite effectively. Then the girl calls him a coward and says they went to great lengths just to fight her. Without giving her a chance to react, the opponent grabs her head firmly, immobilizing her. With that, the tattooed man says he'll see how long she can keep running her mouth. In another scene, the writer tries to call his sister, but the call goes to voicemail. He wonders where she is, since the girl had said she'd arrive in 10 minutes. He doesn't realize that two people are watching him from the top of a building. One of the men recognizes him as the gate assistant who annoyed him earlier. Up above, the bald man complains that he can't see the demon's sword anywhere. His partner tells him to stop whining, since their mission is just to monitor. At that moment, the bald man gets annoyed at having to do such a trivial task on a day like this. In response, his colleague explains that they must keep watch because he might be linked to the Guardian. With a serious look, the green-haired man says you never know what could happen. He believes that the Demon Swords Guild might be a new unit under the Guardian, so he suggests that the gate assistant might actually be a powerful specialist. Suddenly, the protagonist vanishes and the men on the rooftop wonder where he went. At that moment, a shadow forms above the two of them. The Thunder Emperor appears above them, asking what they were talking about while they panic. He stares at them with a serious look and asks them to explain more about the situation. With a smile on his face, the tattooed man tells the girl to bite down hard because it's going to hurt. Then he hits her hard and the long-haired girl is thrown backward. She doubles over in pain while wiping her mouth. Even without her powers, the girl raises her arm to block the next punch. Her arm shows the mark from the impact of the blocked strike, but the bald man says it's not over yet and prepares another punch with a grin. He then lands a powerful punch straight to her chest without mercy. From the strength of the blow, the girl is hurled into her car with great force by the enemy. At that moment, the opponent slowly approaches the fallen girl and laments her situation. He says people should witness this so they'll know the Crimson Flame isn't such a big deal. Lying on the ground, the girl calls him a coward for bringing backup to their fight. Hearing the provocation, the bald man's expression completely changes to one of pure rage. Full of anger, he kicks the girl hard while she's still on the ground. He yells that he's going to shut her mouth once and for all after that comment. Watching from a distance, the sorceress wonders why he still hasn't finished the fight. The brown-haired woman says she doesn't care since the captain will handle everything. Suddenly, the protagonist appears behind them, asking darkly what they're doing. The sorceress is shocked and completely confused by the young man's sudden appearance. The two of them turn around at the same time. With a cold stare, the young man asks again what exactly they're doing right now. They both freeze, staring at the boy who appeared out of nowhere. Meanwhile, the girl on the ground complains that the whole situation is incredibly embarrassing. The tattooed man wonders how he got there since he didn't sense any presence. Faced with this, the brown-haired woman is also deeply frightened by the writer's arrival. Suddenly, her instincts begin to scream as she senses a danger coming from the young man. She sees him as a being from another dimension, something completely out of the ordinary. At that moment, the protagonist repeats the question to the woman, wanting to know what they were doing. He tells her to forget it and says he'll ask the man standing behind her instead. In response, the sorceress panics and creates a barrier of energy, ordering him not to move. But the bespectacled writer simply ignores her and walks past as if nothing happened. After he passes her, an explosion of energy occurs, knocking her down. The woman is literally shocked after being hit by the power. Then she collapses to the ground while the bald man steps back, startled. He wonders how the writer can use magic if the ceiling barrier is still active. But the tattooed man realizes that's not the most important thing to focus on right now. The young man with glasses calmly approaches the man who begins to back away. With a serious expression, the young man extends his hand toward the enemy's face. The writer says it's the man's turn to answer, and the bald guy thinks he's going to die. At that moment, the Crimson Flame gets up and tells him to stop because the enemy is hers. She then takes the chance to ask for a favor, since her brother is already there. The bespectacled writer agrees to the situation and seems very calm about everything. He wonders where he should start while helping the girl stand up. In response, she asks him to go after Hyojun and Tae-san, who must have been ambushed. With a smile, the young man tells her not to worry, as he already sent help too. Switching scenes, both Jung-hong and Hyojun are shown lying defeated on the ground. At that moment, the man with the spear says the two have aged quite a bit and that he was expecting a tough fight. He wonders who would have thought it'd be that easy to defeat the two experienced men. As one of them tries to get up, the warrior slowly walks toward him. The young man then raises his weapon into the air, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. With a serious expression, he says he'll end it in the least painful way possible. The spearman swings his weapon forcefully, creating a large slash of blue energy. But suddenly, Demon's Sword appears and blocks the attack with his massive black blade. On the ground, the bearded man is surprised and seems to recognize the figure who saved him. A purple light shines in the swordsman's eyes as he stares down the new opponent. The spearman asks if he's connected to the Guardian, but the newcomer denies it. Holding his sword, he says he's only there to do a small favor. Back in the previous scene, the protagonist says he's heading out and tells the girl to take care. Like a comet, he flies away as his sister watches from the ground. Then the girl decides she needs to finish her unfinished business. With a frightening smile, the young woman says it's time to start round 2. The bald man was trembling and the girl stared at him in confusion. But then he smiles and starts laughing in a very strange and uncontrollable way. The bald man wonders what kind of monster that young man was and says he thought he was going to die. He says she saved him and asks if he should thank her for that. The girl is unfazed and says he's about to meet his end at her hands. Right after that, the tattooed man taunts her, saying that even with the seal broken, she still can't fight. At that moment, an aura of fire begins to envelop the woman's entire body, shocking the bald man. She starts to invoke her healing power. The flames then begin to heal every wound on her body. The bald man is left stunned as he realizes what's happening. In response, the girl unleashes a massive surge of fire energy that shocks the leader of the 9 dragons. He is completely terrified by the girl's power and wonders what it is. She says she didn't expect to use that ability on someone like him. With a serious expression, the Crimson Flame tells the opponent to consider this an honor. The tattooed man thinks she was a battle mage, was she hiding healing magic all along. At that moment, the long-haired girl notices the enemy's nervousness and says he looks shaken. She begins to levitate in the air, forming several fire spheres around her as she stares at him. Then the young woman asks if he thought he was the only one of the trump card and launches her attack. In response, the mercenary becomes furious and realizes that the girl's abilities have evolved. Desperate, he runs through the flames, trying to dodge the enemy's attacks. The bald man remembers that she had been injured and now she displays an enormous destructive power. He narrowly dodges another fireball and calls the girl trash. With an expression of pure hatred, the mercenary continues to be pressured by the young woman. At that moment, the tattooed man seems to prepare to strike back and shouts the name of the Crimson Flame. But she gives him no chance, and a massive explosion of fire engulfs the entire street. With a confident smile, the long-haired girl watches the result of her attack. Suddenly, she notices something and her expression changes completely. Emerging from the flames, the bald man runs and yells that she doesn't stand a chance. The tattooed man furiously shouts that he won't let things end like this. Then the bald man tries to punch her, but the punch seems to have no effect at all, blocked by a barrier of fire surrounding the woman. He says her tricks don't even tickle him. Gritting his teeth, the opponent prepares to land a blow with all his strength, shouting that he's one of the 9 dragons and lands a powerful punch on the fire-wielding young woman. But the Crimson Flame thinks that, as expected, a strong person remains strong. The girl jumps away from the enemy and lands atop her car. She lands gracefully on the roof of the vehicle, staring at him with seriousness. At that moment, the bald man mocks her, saying she acts tough, but now she's running from him. Right after, the long-haired girl raises her hand and says she's not running at all. On top of the car, she begins to gather an enormous amount of fire to attack. With a confident smile, the long-haired young woman builds up her firepower. Then she says she'll show the bald man something better and creates a sun of flames. On the ground, the leader of the 9 dragons also releases a green energy that bursts from his feet. A giant serpent of green energy forms around the tattooed man. Smiling, he says that now things are getting fun and that it all ends here. At that moment, the Crimson Flame extends her hand and launches the massive fire sphere without hesitation. The 2 powerful attacks collide with incredible force. The fireball and the serpent of energy explode, but the bald man seems to struggle to hold back the woman's power. He shouts that it's not over and that he won't lose to someone like her. Engulfed by the flames, the enemy roars in fury that he is one of the 9 dragons. A giant explosion erupts and the woman simply watches from atop the car. Right after, the girl says he's talked enough about the 9 dragons and tells him to shut up. She then introduces herself as Hongyam of the Scarson Gate with an imposing tone. However, right after that, the girl feels a sharp pain and groans in frustration. She admits that maybe she overdid it a little with her power after all. Shifting scenes, we see the swordsman and the spearman exchanging blows at high speed. Faced with this, the enemy thinks that the young man's talent is even greater than the rumors suggested. He's impressed that someone so young has managed to reach such a level of strength. Then the spear warrior prepares to unleash another attack with his weapon. The attacks clash, pushing the demon's sword backward. Songwoo notices that the attack left a shallow cut on his arm, surprising him. The opponent then regrets having to end such a promising genius with his own hands. At that moment, the spearman says that if they keep fighting, there'll be no turning back for the swordsman. With that, he invites him to join Parthenon and let his talent flourish. In response, the swordsman says that, as he mentioned before, he's only there to do a favor. He also states that he has no connection to the Soksan Gate. While saying this, the young man releases his aura to make his affiliation clear. With a serious expression and his body covered in power, the young man begins to introduce himself. He reveals that he is a member of the guild All's Well That Ends Well.